Now they're on. Yo,
Okay.
what up, chat?
Yo, what's up, chat?
It's your boys, the superhero stoners, Blunt Man and Chronic 2.0. Um, Billionaire on the mic right now with the purple mask. And that sexy cyborg over there is Mr. Gundam. Say hello, Mr. Gundam.
What's up, chat?
How you feeling today?
I'm a little high.
Good. You already got a little high. Last time you got a little high before, and you got super litty.
Yeah.
This is a nice bowl of some gelato do mixed with some of the, what was that? Oz?
Yeah, it was the Oz strain.
But I don't know what strain it was.
Nah.
Okay, well, some gelato do mixed with a hint of some other yummy legal. So we do live in a legal state. This is a stream where we talk about why it's okay to do all drugs and why all drugs should be legalized, and to reduce the harms that have been done in the war on drugs, and trying to end the war on drugs as we currently know it. We're going to be talking about a bill today, a legalization bill that made it for the second time up to the Senate, passed through the House, just barely, like super barely, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about that tonight. That's going to take up the majority of the beginning of the stream, depending on how hard we go in on some of them and how long we rant. It may end up taking up a good portion of the stream. We are hoping to chop that up and throw it into a nicely clean edited version on YouTube, and we'll be working on that this weekend. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be watching the hour-long debate that happened within the Senate before they ended up going to vote and passing the bill. And we'll also talk about the amendments that were made to the bill before it passed. We're going to go ahead and start off with some bong token, ganja smoking.
Midnight token. Playing that music in the dark.
Hmm.
Got my Snoop lighter. I don't know if Snoop needs to know if he's getting paid for this. Get your money, Snoop. That's all I gotta say about that.
Shout out to Snoop. All right, Chad, we're going to hop on into this. Off.
Let us see. Let's see what the heck is happening in this Senate House. From what I understand, the vote was split pretty evenly across party lines.
Yeah, it was extremely even. So, yeah, we're going to cover this article, which is from Marijuana Moment. It's probably one of the best bill tracking websites as far as marijuana goes, and other psychedelics as well, and other drugs. But their primary focus is marijuana. Kyle Yeager is the main reporter, and then Tom Engels as well. I think he's the owner, or I'm not exactly sure, but he's high up as well. Both of those guys do a lot of great work, a lot of on the ground reporting as to all of these bills and where they're at, and I really appreciate what they do. It's They're super awesome, and you should go support their Patreon if you guys haven't, and you should definitely check out their website if you're interested in more of this stuff. And we are not paid advertisers for these guys. I just really appreciate the service that they provide. Funnily enough, on April Fools, the House did approve a federal marijuana legalization bill for the second time in history. Now, the last time that this did make its way to Senate, it got struck down, which is unfortunate. But yeah, this is the MORE Act. The article states the U.S. House of Representatives on Friday. Let me take a hit of this first before we get into this.
Mhm. Pinky's out, kids.
The U.S. House of Representatives on Friday approved a bill to federally legalize marijuana for the second time in history, also adopting a pair of amendments to the legislation before final passage. Following an hour of debate on the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement MORE Act from House Judiciary Chairman Gerald Nader and the approval of two amendments and the rejection of a third, the full chamber voted 220 to 204 to end federal cannabis prohibition and promote social equity in the industry.
Yep.
The full chamber, yeah. So they voted. The votes fell largely along party lines, with only 3 Republicans supporting the measure. So I do believe that the Democrats have the House, right?
We have
So
both.
they have both right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Democrats definitely outweigh them, so they pass. But
Wait, last time I checked, they have both.
the vote fell largely along party lines, with only 3 Republicans supporting the measure and 2 Democrats opposing it. So yeah, basically that ended up only being a positive one, if you were to like average that out. But given that there were more Democrats than Republicans, the vote ended up passing pretty by a good margin. A nearly identical version of the MORE Act passed in 2020, but it stalled in the Senate. It passed through the sponsors panel again this session in September. Nadler opened Friday's floor debate, calling the MORE Act long overdue legislation that would reverse decades of failed federal policies based on the criminalization of marijuana. Representative Nadler tweeted, "Happening today, the House is considering my bill, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement MORE Act. This bill will reverse decades of failed federal policies based on the criminalization of marijuana. It also takes steps to address the heavy toll these policies have taken across the country, and particularly among communities of color. For too long, we have treated marijuana as a criminal justice problem instead of as a matter of personal choice and public health."
Okay. Actually, so the Senate count is currently 50 Republicans, 48 Democrats, and 2 independents.
So
So
the
we're
Republicans
actually
have the
pretty split.
Senate by like 2 votes.
Yeah, there's pretty split evenly. Democrats are a bit weaker because of the 2 independents.
Right.
But the 2 independents, their caucuses are Democrats.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they normally vote Democrat, or so this thing says.
Whatever one's views are on the use of marijuana for recreational or medicinal use, the chairman said the policy of arrest, prosecution, and incarceration at the federal level has proven both unwise and unjust. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said that the MORE Act is an important piece of legislation, and he knows that because voters have consistently opted to legalize cannabis at the state level at the ballot. He also pushed back against criticism from GOP members that Democrats were ignoring critical issues like the war in Ukraine and inflation. The leader said that this bill is what the American people tell us they think is the appropriate thing to do. This bill is a matter of justice and equal opportunity, Hoyer said. It's about addressing systematic inequalities and reforming our criminal justice system so that Americans and America can become a better, stronger, more fair, and more just America. So the House ended up passing 2 amendments and rejected one that had been made. in order after the debate concluded. Here is the description of the proposed revisions. The approved amendment, unfortunately, I wasn't a fan of these amendments, nor of the rejected amendment.
But yo, you know that when it goes to the Senate, they're gonna make even more amendments.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like cutting, chopping room, and then fucking the executioner.
Right. So they ended up provides $10 million for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to conduct research on technologies and methods that law enforcement may use to determine whether a driver is impaired by marijuana. I would first say that the studies should first go into how marijuana impairment works and what exactly it impairs before they just throw you straight into saying that they're impaired and try to lump it in the same way as alcohol, because it is different. And so first you have to understand in what ways it impairs you, if at all, which studies currently are very 50-50 and more leaning towards, actually, I'd say that it doesn't impair, or at least not anywhere near in the same way as alcohol.
I would have even more of a question about what that means, because like we've already know that there's been news of them having all this money for training in specific things, and they move it all to the police warrior training bullshit.
Right.
And it's all just more, this is how you kill the bad guy training.
Exactly. Just like the
they have enough
police academy training stuff in high school and the JROTC and stuff. It's all just like you're either training to become a cop or you're training to become a killing machine.
Like, they need to learn, what is it? They need to not give them more money. They have already too much training. How about cut back on some of the warrior training, give them some talk to the people training.
I think that they're also just like undertrained too. I think that they're not trained. They're trained like maybe their training program just needs to be revamped too. The way in which they're trained. Like, I agree with you with the talking part, but at the same time, like, they're just so yeah, I guess I get what you're saying. They don't need to be taught. They shouldn't need to be taught as much defense, because they shouldn't need to be, people shouldn't start shooting at the cops when the cops show up. Like, it shouldn't be like that. But the people are so afraid of being locked up forever because that's the only way that we deal with, like,
no, it's crime. Not even that. It's that cops are actually being taught every person that approaches you is a potential target, is a potential fucking enemy to you. That's what they're taught now. Anyone that approaches you is is that guy gonna stab me?
Right. Well, I know in my personal experience, I had a time where police were called to the scene of my house, and it was in the middle of the night, and the door was left open, and because the door was left open, and they're supposedly, at least this is what they told us, because the door was left wide open, and they didn't know what kind of scene they were entering into. They had to come in guns drawn, and they ended up calling my name and shouting it over and over, and I ended up waking up and going down the stairs in my boxers, and I was greeted by multiple guns pointed at me, and that was all apparently okay to happen. And yeah, like, I mean, that just the fact that they're already coming in, death machines pointed straight at the person that they're calling down to, like, speak with, that's an issue. Like, I should have never been approached in that way. Like, the scene that they were coming to definitely wasn't something that would have necessarily been inherently violent. Um, there was no reason for them. Like, I'm not gonna give the full context of the story, but there was no reason for them to uh think that they were entering into a violent scene. And yet this is how they came into our home, and this was the approach. And the reason, supposedly, like I said, was because they didn't know what kind of scene they were entering into, and the door was open. The door in just a normal, like, little suburban neighborhood area by a park. And yeah, it's just pretty crazy that was the way that they came in. Death machines pointed.
Yeah.
Just to ask questions.
Just to ask questions.
Yeah. Point is, the police come in guns ablazing. First, that's how they see everyone as a potential menace or enemy, someone that can attack them, and so they, in order to protect themselves, they feel that they need to be strapped and point them at you while they're just even trying to investigate something. And that's their first instinct, and that's the problem with the training, is that is the first instinct. They feel like they need to come in with their guns drawn, even in like situations where there is definitely no need for that to happen. In fact, this reminds me of another story, one that we may cover or at least speak about, and I definitely don't want to offend. So if the family has any issue with us speaking about this, I know that Dr. Carl Hart speaks about this in his book and in some of his things, and I've seen other people speak about it. But basically, there was a time of police brutality and an example of police brutality, and of course, just like with the drug war, right? I'm taking an extreme. This is an extreme, but this is the point. Like, this is the point of, like, how is this helping either? So basically, this police officer ended up throwing a flashbang into a home where they said that there was a meth dealer there, which ended up being false. The person that they claimed was there wasn't even there. But they ended up coming up with a warrant, which I guess there was even some, I'm not too sure on that, so I'm not going to comment on that, but I guess there was even some legality issues of how that warrant even got served, like that some of the information wasn't correct that was given, and that information was left out or something like that, that basically allowed the warrant to go through. And the lady knowingly did that because she wanted the warrant to go through. And then this warrant ends up going through, and they end up sending a SWAT team, basically, because the police have SWAT teams that they can send into. And if you're making some drugs, oh man, you're dangerous. We need a SWAT team. That guy's growing some pot. That guy is fucking, yeah. That guy must be strapped to the core, or he's got a whole cartel or something. That's how they treat you, even if it's just a single guy. In this case, they were literally going after a single guy. They sent in a SWAT team, and the SWAT team ends up throwing a flashbang into these people's home, and it lands in a crib, and it blew a hole in a baby. And this is the kind of way that the cops are trained and that they think is appropriate to conduct themselves. The person who blew up the baby, by the way, did get off, of course.
Yeah, no, he's no problems with that guy. He's working great. Good job, officer. He flashbanged the baby's face. Marijuana, the freaking gateway gun.
Yeah, but that's an example of our law enforcement and how hot they like coming in.
They're coming too hot. Slow that approach.
And that's how they're trained.
Coming nice, easy.
That's how they're trained to come in.
Maybe with some wine glasses.
This is what your hard-earned tax dollars are going to, the blowing up of babies' ribs.
Like, yo, if a cop came in with some wine glasses, chink chink, yo. But if a cop comes in with this gun, I'm like, Yo, sir, tone it down there. Tone it down.
Oh.
Ooh.
So yeah, this provides, anyway, going back to the issues that I have with this particular amendment, it implies that we already have true definition of marijuana driver impairment, and we don't yet. We don't know anything about it
It
yet.
is
There
still
is,
inconclusive.
yes, all of that data is still so inconclusive, and so therefore, we need to first do more research, just like we did with alcohol, on exactly what we understand about what impairs us. And I guarantee you that we're gonna probably be surprised, or people who really think that this thing like is this crazy thing, when we are actually able to do benefit studies and like other kinds of things, are gonna get their minds blown, just from someone who's worked with the substance now for many years. But
One of the main reasons for all the inclusivity in the ability to test for someone who's if someone is impaired under marijuana is because there's no way of telling how much THC it actually takes to cause impairment. Like there's no set amount, not even for any one person, just not even at all.
right, blood alcohol content works because you're literally consuming a liquid substance, a substance that actually gives you, some sort of something that you're digesting, whereas THC is literally just activating neurochemical responses in your mind. It's not
Yeah,
quite
so
the
there's
exact same thing, so you can't tell. Like impairment would mean literally like your ability to, consciousness almost, in a sense. But like you have to, obviously there's motor impairment too, which is what another thing that alcohol does, the main thing I believe that alcohol does, but it also does some kind of psychoactive impairment, probably at a certain degree as well, for sure. Um but in cannabis case, we're not quite sure in which case that works, and so you can't just do a breathalyzer and be like, oh yeah, we're just gonna treat it like all the drugs are just gonna. Oh my god, you can't just treat every drug like if we're gonna
I
figure
gotta
out
kill
DUI for
Biden.
every single drug, we're just gonna freaking make a breathalyzer for every drug, because it all works the same. Like
I
that
didn't
is not scientific whatsoever.
I didn't notice Joe Biden was in this on this page.
He's sitting over there. White House won't say if Biden supports federal marijuana legalization bill. The president agrees that we need to rethink our approach to cannabis policy. What a bullshit, neutral ass answer to avoid the question entirely. Like,
You guys, you have no idea how many times Biden, or maybe you do, some of you really should look into it, how many times Biden has actually sided with the right, like way long ago, way long ago.
agrees that we need to rethink our approach to cannabis policy. What does that even mean? Like, that could be so negative and that could be positive. It's literally, like I said, it's just such a, oh my god, their PR team was like, hats off all around, guys. We made the most neutrally vague response possible. No one will know how to read this shit. It gives us plenty of time to come up with how we want Biden to feel about this.
Right? How we want Biden to say no.
Biden is a huge fan of the war on drugs, contrary to the fact that he campaigned his presidency this time around on ending the criminalization of cannabis.
Because that's just how his party's swinging.
Which is exactly, which is something that he would not have endorsed in previous elections, has not endorsed.
Biden has swinged far right, way in the past.
Yeah, and he loves the police. He said, remember we watched that on this stream. It's like, don't defund the police, fund the police, fund the police. Fund the police. Oh my god, it's like when you're watching like I know that's obviously like part of what they're trying to show. Um what they're trying to show in that movie Snowpiercer, but like where they're indoctrinating the children and like just think of like when people are just like fund the police. The kids are like, yeah, I fund the police. They think like, yeah, they're doing good things. The babies are getting blown up.
Ugh. Yo, we haven't watched this video.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna get into it. We gotta just cover these amendments still. Like I said, I knew this one was gonna take up a while, but this is gonna be. It's effective for us anyway to make content while we're like making content. So, Friday would normally be our podcast day, so I figured we could like just at least for now make something while we're getting that all set up.
Yo, I would like to take part in the Republican Connor Lab. Requires the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health to conduct a study on the impairment of legalization of recreational.
The impact of legalization.
Yes, the impact, sorry.
Yeah.
By states in the workplace and develop best practices for use by employers that are transitioning their policies related to the use of recreational cannabis, prioritizing the development of best practices for employers engaged in federal infrastructure projects, transportation, public safety, and national security.
Yeah.
For my nation's security, I would most definitely get high all day and then see how that affects me.
Yeah, well, no, they're saying though. So this other one, it requires them to conduct a study, right, on the impact of the legalization. But yeah, it's basically saying that best practices. They're basically saying that employers, especially federal employers, need to come up with policies for how to handle people who are using weed, and it's just crazy.
I volunteer to go to work and smoke at work and then tell you how it affects me.
People have been fucking using weed and going to work and going home and using weed and going to work for
provide me
centuries.
With weed. They'll give me weed to just try it, and then I'll be like,
millennia.
I mean, I'm doing great,
honestly,
guys.
like maybe not work in the way that we think of work today, but people have been like living their normal life and using weed and hashish since like the 7th. It goes back like the 7th century or something, like something crazy like that.
Look, you guys, weed makes my old ass robo knees feel fantastic.
We do not need to conduct a study to understand how employers will need to handle the impact of stoners, of more stoners in the world. Like, oh my god, what a wild bill. Anyway, that one approved very with a majority. Same thing with the 10 million to go to the Highway Traffic Commission, but rejected. What do you know? Would have required federal agencies to review security clearance denials going back to 1971 and retroactively make it so that cannabis could not be used as a reason to deny or rescind a security clearance.
Rejected.
Rejected slightly, but by 5 votes rejected. So of course, people who have been denied security clearance and been used, they used cannabis as a reason to do this, and
rejected.
That sounded perfect. And as a reason to that sounded so fucking funny and perfect. Holy moly. I couldn't hear I couldn't hear it as well that time. Yeah, it sounds good when you go slow. And
I love my robot voice.
Retroactively made it so the cannabis could not be used, but that first one was like golden. As a reason to deny or rescind a security clearance. So yeah, basically, if they've ever denied you a security clearance for these kinds of reasons, we're not going to go back in time and look at that or review any of that. So they're just like, fuck you guys who have been fucked over by your weed.
We're not wasting our agents' time.
We're not wasting our time. Yet we're gonna conduct a fucking study on the impact of legalization on what marijuana users are gonna, how they're gonna impact federal workplace.
Right.
We have time to do that, but not time to review these security clearance denials that they used cannabis as the bullshit reason to why they pulled them. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to be listening to the debate, listening to these Republicans and Democrats and other speakers basically give their opinions on why or why not the bill should pass. And then after that, they go into the votes. We're not going to watch the whole votes. We're just going to, like I said, we're going to watch the debate, and then we're going to comment a little bit on it, and we'll get into some different talking points. And after that, if we have any time left tonight, then we're going to jump into a little bit of Nobody Saves the World. Clear a dungeon. So we're starting now. Wait, do you have the video up? I need to share it with you, huh?
Yeah, share it with share. You see that? You thrust your pelvis. That fucking thing. I love that fucking. I think it's dead, my brother.
Yeah, I think so too. Get some water before we get into this. Gonna hydrate. Make sure you hydrate, chat, especially if you got that cotton mouth.
Hydrate up, chat. Pankies, like a gentleman.
Shout out to the team.
Shout out to the team, chat.
Love the team. Love the support. You guys make it really fun. Couldn't do it without you. Shout out to all the Jamies of the world. The helpers.
Thank you, Jaminis. And James Pisces.
I'm going live to you with this screen. You got that?
Yeah,
you see it full screen now?
Yeah, I see it.
Yep. And we're gonna dive in right now. We'll listen.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1017, I call up H.R. 3617, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or the MORE Act, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 203, H.R. 3617, a bill to decriminalize and deschedule cannabis, to provide for reinvestment in certain persons adversely impacted by the war on drugs, to provide for expungement of certain cannabis offenses, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1017, in lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on the Judiciary printed in the bill, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 117-37, modified by the amendment printed in Part A of House Report 117-285, is adopted and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill as amended shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary or their respective designees.
Yes, so 1 hour.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, and the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Bentz, each will control 30 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 3617.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I
don't know if it's just his his voice, but he gives me like mobster vibes.
yield myself such time as I may
That's
consume.
just New York, bro. He's
Gentleman
from New
is
York.
recognized.
Yeah, for
Mr.
sure.
Speaker, H.R.
It's just the
3617, the
I
Marijuana
could totally hear
Opportunity
him like
Reinvestment and
saying,
Expungement Act, or the
I'm
MORE Act,
walking here.
Yeah, I can hear him say sleeping with the fishes.
is long overdue legislation that would reverse decades of failed federal policies based on the criminalization of marijuana. It would also take steps to address the heavy toll these policies have taken across the country, particularly among communities of color. For far too long, we have treated marijuana as a criminal justice problem instead of as a matter of personal choice and public health.
Yes, sir.
Whatever one's views are on the use of marijuana for recreational or medicinal use, the policy of arrest, prosecution, and incarceration at the federal level has proven both unwise and unjust. That is why the MORE Act would set a new path forward and would begin to correct some of the injustices of the last 50 years. The bill decriminalizes marijuana at the federal level by removing it from the Controlled Substances Act. This change applies retroactively to prior and pending convictions. It does not, however, undermine the ability of states to apply their criminal laws to marijuana or to legalize and regulate it as they see fit. The bill also eliminates barriers to medical research, allows the VA to recommend medical marijuana to veterans living with PTSD, and it allows financial institutions to service the marijuana industry. It provides for expungement or resentencing of certain federal marijuana arrests and convictions, and it supports expungement programs at the state and local levels. In addition, the bill authorizes a sales tax on marijuana sales and directs those revenues to an opportunity trust fund to support communities harmed by the war on drugs.
We pause. I don't like what he said there.
Which part?
So, when he was saying that, I mean, this is a legalization bill,
Yeah.
right?
No, it is a decriminalization.
Yeah,
But
it's
also a legalization. Yes.
Yeah. So he said that he would allow doctors of the VA to prescribe or to give out
recommend
medical marijuana
Yeah.
prescriptions.
Yeah, he said to
But
recommend.
why would they need a prescription if it's legal?
Right. Well, they're saying medical marijuana, right? Because what they're trying to do, and this is part of the current legalization model, is that they're trying to make this differentiation between regular cannabis and medical cannabis. And not to say that there shouldn't be medical products derived from cannabis and cannabinoids. Absolutely. If you can come up with an actual treatment and come up with a lot of efficacy, and we see that it's having really positive results and treating all these different kinds of things, then dope. That's great. We should have that too. That's what true medical is like. But right now, medical, at least in the legal medical industry, medical just means like stronger dose. Like you in recreational markets,
weed is stronger.
not necessarily. Well, yeah, exactly. There's it's not stronger, but it's in some cases it's more like the dosing. So like for edibles or for like things that have milligrams, you know, like how much you can buy at a single time. The states have, some states at least, most states I think have all created possession limits, which is, I can't say for sure that all states, but I think most. Which is funny because like there's no possession limits for how much booze you can have. Like people have wine cellars, and people have like, you know, like stuff like that. Like people have like tequila freaking barrels and barrels of tequila like down in these like bar areas and stuff, and it's totally fine. But you have a legal possession limit of how much pot you can have. Pretty crazy.
But yeah, but no, but like to even need a doctor to recommend, sure, but to have it give out prescriptions, if it becomes federally legal, we should not need prescriptions at all.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the fact that he's adding this amendment for prescription legalization for the medical use of cannabis, I mean, we should just sell that stuff at the store.
Right, but like I said, there's certain specific they're saying that like high dose, at least what they currently believe, or at least certain legalization models believe, is that there's a certain dose that's acceptable. Just like with alcohol, right? Certain alcohol content is acceptable, but then the spirits are like where it's like, ooh, that's like a little, you're getting a little too scary there.
Yo, have you not have absinthe? It's fucking knocks you on your ass when they melt that fucking sugar cube. Oh, oh. And then you're like,
No, I have not partake, or if I have, it might have been in a drink that I've tried a few times I tried drinking, but I wouldn't be able to tell you.
absinthe, you would know that fucking shit wrecks you.
I just alcohol just really didn't do anything to me the few times that I tried it. I just like kind of had like a natural tolerance, or I don't know what it was. But I mean, I literally, I told the lady, I was like, I wanted to feel what, not like I didn't want to get like blackout drunk or anything, but I wanted to feel like whatever drunk was supposed to be, like, you know, that's the high, right? I wanted to feel whatever that was that people said the reason people drank alcohol. So I did some shots, and I just asked the lady, I literally asked the bartender, I was like, what's like the strongest thing you can make? And I forgot what the hell it was called, but it had the name like motherfucker in it. And I was like, okay, make me one of those. And then like I ended up having like two of those. Like I drank the whole thing. And then like I said, I had shots, I had some other drinks, and I was feeling like not, I didn't really, I don't know if I've really felt whatever I was supposed to be feeling, whatever the alcohol thing is supposed to be feeling. I was feeling fine. I mean, I like got home, I felt entirely fine. Maybe I was like slight buzzing that second time around when I like drank all of that, but like I said, the first time I did, definitely really didn't feel anything, and then the second time around it was like, eh. And every now and then I'll like sip and taste a drink if I'm like on a date or something and I have a drink or whatever, but I'll just like see what it tastes like out of curiosity, but it's just not, I do not partake. Yes, the adios motherfucker, that's exactly what it was.
Adios, motherfucker.
Yeah, I had like two of those, I think. They were pretty big ones. They tasted good. I remember everything like tasted pretty good. I thought most of them tasted pretty good. Some of them were really sour, but like, and for me, I guess that kind of sour, whatever I'm describing as sour, was like not a good sour for me, because I have lots of sours that I do like. So I don't know exactly which one it was, because I'm just not, like I said, I'm not that familiar with the taste of the different ones. Anyway, back to this. Yes, I agree with you. That was the one trigger thing that I already heard right away when he said that earlier. Let's talk about that again.
Marijuana at the federal level by removing it from the Controlled Substances Act. This change applies retroactively to prior and pending convictions. It does not, however, undermine the ability of states to apply their criminal laws to marijuana.
Wait, what's this?
36 states and the District of Columbia have legalized medical cannabis. 19 states and the District of... Mr. Speaker, criminal penalties for marijuana offenses and the resulting collateral consequences are unjust and harmful to our society. The MORE Act comprehensively addresses these injustices.
Making short work of the hard-earned money of all Americans, but the main priority.
And I want to proud to
Were
be
we
the
not this
sponsor of
far
this
in?
legislation. There
No.
are many
Did I
people
fuck
who
it
are
up?
responsible for getting us to
Yeah.
this point today.
Or
I
was
want
I?
to thank them for their efforts. This includes Congresswoman Barbara Lee,
You've lost it.
marijuana industry. It provides for expungement or resentencing of certain federal marijuana arrests
Was it this
and
one?
convictions,
Yeah,
and supports
yeah.
expungement programs at the state and local levels. In addition, the bill authorizes a sales tax on marijuana sales and directs those revenues.
Of course, it says, hey, marijuana also, we get to tax it a little more because, you know, we're legalizing it, even though we took it away for, you know, financial reasons of our own. We're also now that we're giving it back to you, we're going to add extra sales taxes on it because, you know, we know people really want it and are going to buy it. So we got to make our money.
Right? The freaking liquor tax is so wonderful, isn't it, kids?
You literally used this law and these laws to persecute human beings and ruin their lives and label them as felons and lock them up in cages that were for-profit businesses. And now that we're bringing it back, we're going to tax you on it. Because,
Yep.
you know, we still got to keep making money off you guys. Now that we're losing you out of the cages, we got to make money out of you users.
Right? Where does he say that the money's going into? He was
Oh,
about to say. He was about to
Yeah.
say where the money's going into.
Revenues to an opportunity trust fund to support communities harmed by the war on drugs.
a trust fund.
It also
Who gets
establishes a
to,
wide
where does that
Who's
go?
in charge of this trust fund?
range of grant
Right.
programs to support equal access to the benefits of decriminalization.
This is the thing you have to hear with the Democrats. They say things the general like person who's just like generally left leaning is like gonna hear all these things and be like, oh yeah, like he wants what I want. But then they slowly weave in these little things that you're like, oh wait, that's actually not good. But like, because, you know, ultimately the government still wants to push its overall agenda. Usually, like we said with Biden earlier, like there are still parts of these arguments, even though they're for drugs, there's also parts of them that we should be wary of. Like Mr. Gundam brought out the one specifically when he's going to talk about the,
I don't like it. Put it in a trust fund. Why not literally just like, because, you know, the communities have governments, you know? You could fund that money just into the communities' governments who are affected in the area were affected by the war on drugs. And then the community government could be like, okay, so we're going to spend this much on playgrounds. We're going to spend this much to fix the fucking potholes. We're going to spend this much to, you know, get a community center and build a park and shit.
right.
But instead, no, we're going to put it in a trust fund and someone's going to like be like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, you get some money, you get some money right now, you get some money right now. I'm going to fly on a private jet to that other community and drink champagne at the bottles. And then, oh, you'll get just some money. Well, you said some mean things to me on Twitter, so you're not going to get no money right now. I'm just going to say that we're reviewing your application.
Right. Okay, so anyway, let's get back into this thing. We were looking for this clip.
When it comes to our immigration laws, the bill prospectively and retroactively
did he just say it?
ensures that marijuana will not be considered a controlled substance, directly mirroring the protection and relief under the criminal justice provisions of the bill. This
See, if it's
protects
not a
individuals
controlled
from
substance,
collateral consequences
then you wouldn't need a
for-
prescription
for-
for it.
Right.
for marijuana activity and ensures that immigrants can participate in their state's legal cannabis industry.
The immigrant thing is kind of odd. Like, not saying immigrants shouldn't be able to, but like, why is that like necessarily in there? Like, immigrants should be able to participate. Okay.
In recent
Right,
years,
right.
36 states and the District of Columbia have legalized medical cannabis.
Like,
19
would
states
we
and the District
even
of
still
Columbia
need
have legalized
medical
cannabis
license
for
or
adult
the marijuana
recreational use.
licenses?
I mean, ideally not, but there
Right?
is still states that even have like liquor stores.
True, but and I guess I have a liquor license, but
Yeah.
liquor license is also weird.
And bars have liquor licenses,
I don't like liquor licenses.
but we have those. So I mean, if we're looking at what a regulated way of the government allowing us to do these things looks like, which is ridiculous, even with the alcohol things. But I mean, we could argue that there's probably certain laws that are good, like we said, like that. I could probably say that the alcohol DUI one, like not driving while you're like wasted, is probably really good when because of like the at least the personal experiences that I've had that I've seen people when they're on alcohol. And I've definitely seen people like just not able to control some of their motor function, or just couldn't control, stop themselves from throwing up, or just tumbling over, not able to literally like pick themselves up off the ground. So like, yeah, I've never seen anyone smoking weed really like that. Like maybe someone who like has no tolerance whatsoever and they like took a dab for the first time or something. Like, I know when I took a dab, I went and like took a long like 5-hour nap. But even then, like, I didn't take a dab for the first time when I was like on the road. And even then, I don't know how I would have like handled, because I made the conscious choice, like, oh, I feel really great right now and I'm like kind of tired, I'm gonna go lie down, and I just knocked out for like 5 hours. But like, I probably, if I was still driving, would have been able to like get myself home. I made the choice to go to sleep. It wasn't that I like was just exhausted and then dab knocked me out KO. It just definitely relaxed me enough to the point where I was like, oh, okay, cool, I'm gonna just take a nap right now because I feel super relaxed. So yeah, I mean, it's not really, which goes back to what we were saying earlier, where it's not really the same at all when you're dealing with how these two substances affect you. But I'd say that there are laws in regulated markets. We could argue on the other side that there are certain laws under regulation of like alcohol. The laws for like not driving while intoxicated probably are good. Like in general, we should, if the cops are going to be out there patrolling, they should be preventing harm rather than causing harm. And so like laws that prevent harms that are actually somewhat study based, I feel like are fine if we agree that we're gonna live as a
conclusive.
society. Yeah.
Get conclusive.
If states are the laboratories of democracy, it is long past time for the federal government to recognize that legalization has been a resounding success and that the conflict with federal law has become untenable. While I am proud to be the sponsor of this legislation, there are many people who are responsible for getting us to this point today, and I want to thank them for their efforts. This includes Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Oh, is it like pausing? I feel like it's
The mother of this
freezing.
movement, and Congressman Blumenauer, whose dogged persistence was critical to moving this legislation forward. Congressman Cohen has also been a longtime champion and an important voice in the movement for reform, as has Congresswoman Jackson Lee, who helped shepherd this legislation to the floor. I also want to thank Chairman Neal, who has been a critical partner in drafting the revenue provisions in this bill and in helping move this legislation to the floor, as well as
The
Chairman McGovern,
revenue
who structured
portion
a
of the
good
bill
debate on this
means
bill.
how much we get the tax.
Finally, Speaker Pelosi, Whip Clyburn, and Chairman Jeffries have all been steadfast in their support of this legislation.
Pelosi.
And I want to particularly thank Majority Leader Hoyer for everything he has done to bring this bill to the floor. Mr. Speaker, criminal penalties for marijuana offenses and the resulting collateral consequences are unjust and harmful to our society. The MORE Act comprehensively addresses these injustices, and I urge all my colleagues to support this legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
From Oregon, they said.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, there's a war raging in Ukraine, killing thousands and thousands of innocent people. Gasoline, diesel, grocery prices are through the roof. For all practical purposes, we don't have a southern border anymore, so hundreds of thousands of immigrants continue to flood into the United States, and the situation there is about to get much worse.
Wait. So, what does any of that shit have to do with weed, bro? Literally, did anything that you just heard there have anything to do with cannabis, Mr. Gunn?
Maybe the south of the border? I don't know.
No, that's just
I mean, I would
racist.
like to try some Mexico weed.
It's not very good.
Oh.
That's what we had in El Paso.
But man, hey, you know, I would still like to try. I'm gonna try when it becomes worldwide legal. I'm gonna try weed from every country.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. There's definitely, I'm sure, very fire ass
I'm gonna go on
Mexican
a
growers,
weed tasting tour.
but like this, the cartel doesn't care about like that kind of quality. I feel like maybe there, and I apologize to any cartels that are making some fire ass, bomb ass shit. But it did not make its way across the border, or if it did, I didn't know the guys. Probably because I wasn't hanging out with people who knew cartel. So, I mean,
I was.
Respect.
But yeah, you get to, you know, fucking just smoke the weed from every continent, every fucking country. It's like, England's weed is a bit nutty.
Yeah, I just wanna run this back real quick. Just make sure. I don't think I heard a single thing having to do with cannabis come out of this man's mouth.
No, nothing came out of
Gentleman
Canada.
reserves. The gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
From Oregon. Oregon, by the way, is like the place that currently is decriminalizing psilocybin already and has a legal recreational cannabis market. So like the fact that this guy is on the opposite side, their representative, is pretty wild to me. Like, is this representative of your? This is the representative. This is someone who's speaking on behalf of Oregon, the place that is legalizing psilocybin treatments and legalizing like recreational weed everywhere, and allowed so much growing that there was like oversupply, and like weed is hella cheap there, and people have so much access to so much of it. That
What's your houses in Oregon?
can you explain to me how these laws passed in Oregon, yet this guy represents the will of the people? The guy who's currently about to spit out a bunch of conservative, anti-immigrant, bringing up the war on Ukraine, basically saying like there's a war going on over here, and look at what we're doing. We don't have anything to do with that war. We don't have any. I mean, of course, we're involved because worldwide fucking trade systems and things like that. But like, we're not involved. What does that have to do? What is any of that? Okay, well, let's just hear it again one more time.
Probably oil.
From the top.
Thank you, Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, there's a war raging in Ukraine, killing thousands.
Yeah, he needs a lot. He's going to need a lot of time to fucking spin this somehow into anti-cannabis rhetoric.
Thousands and thousands of innocent people. Gasoline, diesel, grocery prices are through the roof. For all practical purposes, we don't have a southern border anymore, so hundreds of thousands of immigrants continue to flood into the United States, and the situation there is about to get much worse. Rampant inflation is making short work of the hard-earned money of all Americans, but the main priority for the Democrats this week isn't Ukraine, skyrocketing gasoline prices, 8% inflation, or the border crisis. No, instead, it's marijuana.
This is his argument. His argument is, look at all the other things that we have to worry about, but why the hell are we even talking about marijuana? You're right, bro. You're right. Why are we even talking about it? I agree. It's a no fucking brainer that we shouldn't even be talking about it because it's such a minuscule issue. And because it's such a minuscule issue, it shouldn't be Schedule 1 fucking drug. No shit.
Slam the button. Just no brainer. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Jesus Christ. He literally, within his own argument, makes the perfect argument for why it should. Yes, there's all that. That's exactly what legalizers have been saying for forever. Bro, there's all these other problems. The police could be stopping brutal, acts of violence and brutality and rape and larceny and all these other things, and yet instead we focus so much of our efforts against marijuana. And exactly, bro, exactly, I don't understand how he thought that going up like this, unless he's about to spout some pro marijuana shit now. If this is how he just led his argument,
Like, nobody asked for marijuana.
yeah, that's his soul. That's his soul crutch here is nobody. Why are we even talking about this? Like, nobody asked to bring this up. Nobody wants weed. Is that what he's going to go with? I don't know.
I would like to point out that the current president of the United States ran on a platform of legalization. So, I mean, that wasn't very long ago that he became freaking president.
All right, let's let him.
So we're waiting for our legalization, Mr. President.
Yeah, we're still waiting. Been waiting.
It's been obvious for years that at some point marijuana was going to be formally legalized. What's deeply and truly disturbing, however, about this bill is its failure to address the clear consequences of legalization.
This guy from Oregon who has legalized marijuana is about to tell us about the clear downsides of legalization.
Such as what this drug does to children, to drivers on our highways, to the mental health of up to 30% of those adults who choose to use marijuana, to communities inundated with hundreds, if not thousands, of foreign cartel-operated, unlicensed.
Because this guy is a mind reader, and the people are mind readers, and they know what's going on with these people's mental health.
Oh no, not the cartels of the illegal drug market still.
Yeah. Oh my God, the cartels. If he's about to go off on this, like the Politico article about how that we talked about way back when, about how the cartels have these secret farms in legalized places so that they can grow. It's just so ridiculous, such a ridiculous argument.
That out of control marijuana grows. And finally, to those who actually try to produce cannabis marijuana legally. Let's take a closer look at Oregon, my state, to see what really happens when marijuana is legalized without careful and necessary thought.
Wait. So this guy, please again explain to me, representative democracy, please again explain to me, how is this guy the representative for the will of the people of Oregon, and he's literally, his argument is he's about to shit on his own state.
Yeah, he's about to shit on his own state.
And he's the will of the fucking people.
Press play.
Hold on, let me just set this up again so we hear this.
Foreign cartel-operated, unlicensed, out of control marijuana grows. And finally, to those who actually try to produce cannabis marijuana legally.
And he's got a fucking chart.
Let's take a closer look at Oregon, my state, to see what really happens when marijuana is legalized without careful and necessary thought. The picture behind me is a hoop house. It's about 100 feet long and 50 feet wide. At current retail, it will produce about $6 million.
Yeah, so hoop house grows. You'll see that they have like this tarp on the side. So essentially, rather than they're very efficient. So in places in which it's very sunny and you can get sun, and you have like good quality grow conditions, you can set up a greenhouse that basically has like a tarp, and you just let the tarp open for a set amount of hours a day, and then you close it for a set amount of hours a day, and it recreates the same, almost a similar kind of environment to like an indoor setting, but without using electricity, using natural sunlight, which in one case changes the taste of the cannabis plant to a degree, like the way that it's grown in the sun. Also, but while still
it's more natural, it's organic.
And not really. I'd honestly just say, like I said, it's just the way that the light, it makes it grow, and it does affect it. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's super noticeable, but I'd say it's somewhat noticeable. in my experience.
Mm.
But regardless, it's more just that it's super cost effective. Like rather than having to run a ton of electricity and lights and all this UV technology and all these
You know what
you still have to have like an HVAC system running, but like you save so much electricity on these lights, so it's super cheap to run and do big rooms on the cheap without needing to have a high power bill.
This dude was probably selling this illegal cannabis freaking so that he could buy a license and then sell his own weed inside the stores. But like, oh no, the dangerous cartel.
Yeah.
Worth of marijuana a year.
How much worth of
Next
marijuana
picture is
a
a
year?
picture of a grove that's
6
continuing to flood,
million
marketing gasoline price to drivers on our
a
highways.
year.
State to see what really happens
Right,
when
what-
marijuana is legalized without careful and necessary thought. The picture behind me is a hoop house. It's about 100 feet long and 50 feet wide. At
I
current
just learned
retail,
that,
it will
Chad.
produce about $6 million worth of marijuana a year. Next
6
picture is a picture of a grove
million.
consisting of 30 to 40 hoop houses. By the way, these are all in my district in Southern Oregon. If each of these hoop houses is in full production, 40 hoop houses would generate $240 million
Oh, you fucking destroyed those
at
hoop
retail.
houses.
Oh, maybe the Southern District of Oregon. Oh, it's like Bend and okay. Wait, maybe the Southern District of Oregon is much more conservative, and that's why he represents this argument. If so, I'm not familiar with South Oregon politics. But I'd say, like I said, overall, he's just coming and shitting on his own state, which is kind of crazy. Obviously, he's trying to make a point, like using data that they've collected so far, but he's literally like arguing the worst talking points, and they can all be destroyed. I mean, we've already destroyed some of them, but yeah, it's just funny that this is how the Oregon guy is coming up to me when they're like the most progressive, like they're the ones that are about to get, like I said, like them and Colorado are both getting like psilocybin pretty soon. Crazy.
Of marijuana each year. To put this in perspective, there are currently 180 grows like this in Jackson County, Oregon alone, many of them which are illegal, hundreds upon hundreds of hoop houses. Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that a video taken from a helicopter of approximately 180 grows in Jackson County be entered into the record.
Chair can't entertain that request.
I'll move on. These operations are in large part unlicensed, uncontrolled, unregulated, operating on stolen water, ignoring building codes, ignoring land use laws, ignoring labor laws, and importing thousands upon thousands of immigrants to work in squalor and in fear. Why? Because the federal government has refused to help the overwhelmed local law enforcement.
That's quite a thing to assume that they're living in squalor and fear.
Has Mr. Cliff Bentz himself gone to these grows and met these people who are living in squalor and fear?
Didn't he say thousands and thousands of immigrants?
Thousands and thousands.
So
all
he's
living in
interviewed
squalor
all these
and
thousands of immigrants, making sure that all of them were living in squalor and fear.
I want to see the
interviews.
The interviews. I want to
1,000
see
interviews.
I want to see who was interviewed and told and gave them this information that they're all living in squalor and fear.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably squalor and fear that they're gonna get beaten up by the cops and kick the shit out of the country.
And good God, if it's true that they literally were living like that, like why has your law enforcement not done something about this already?
Right? If you knew that
if
these
there's
people
literally like
were
some
living
fucking
in-
human trafficking level slavery going on.
right? And you're just like you just what? You're not cracking down on that harder? This human trafficking?
Instead, it's the fault of marijuana. It's not your fault for not like cracking down on criminal activity that you're saying is happening, but it's marijuana's fault for existing.
Human trafficking caused by marijuana.
Caused by marijuana markets. Yeah, I agree. I agree with him to a certain point. Now here's where we go. Here's where we go with the counterpoint. We're always going to be fair, chat, okay? But here's the counterpoint. Okay, so his argument is that because they legalized, they don't have the policing, which this is true in a lot of the states, especially big ones like California. They do not have the infrastructure to police and regulate this thing in the way that they want to, in the way that they want to. Like I said, they want to keep it like an even more cracked down alcohol like level substance, but they want to recreationally legalize it so that you can still buy it and tax revenue can be generated and yada yada. That's generally what most of the states want. They don't really necessarily care about your personal freedom or any of that stuff. Maybe some of the representatives do. Maybe, I can't speak for all of them, but generally the state doesn't want that. They want what's best for their interests, and usually if the morals of the people in that state represent if they're complaining enough about a certain thing, the state is generally going to act upon that thing so that those people will shut up. And they don't really care so much about the fact that those things go wrong. They care just more about, hey, how much tax money can we make out of this if we bring it back? But anyway, to go back to his point is that if you legalize it in these states, illegal growth will show up, and we can't necessarily police all of that going on. And because it's legal and not criminalized, there's they are still technically doing a criminal thing, though. They don't have a license to do this. So by definition, if that is true what they're saying, they are breaking the law still. So Oregon should be handling that, because that then becomes a law enforcement issue, not an issue of legalization. If legalization is being carried out to the fullest, then unlicensed growers like this would be shut down. They would be serviced like notices that they need to shut down, and if they don't shut down, then you would go in and do what you need to do, which I don't think that, like I said, police should be going in and doing that kind of stuff. But if you're going to use the recreational market as an example, you are literally saying that you're not doing what your laws said would happen if someone wasn't a licensed grower and was still producing and selling. You're literally saying that you're not enforcing that. That's not on recreational marijuana. That's on you not enforcing your own laws. That's you not doing legalization the way it's supposed to be done, or at least the way that you guys have set it up. You haven't even fully executed your vision, and yet you're already saying it's a failure. But anyway, still to go back to his point, one last point. So, their claim, right, is that the cartel moves in for all these things, and it's because of there's recreational market, and so therefore they think that it's okay to grow, and they're gonna go unnoticed because people are just like, oh, it's just another new farm that opened up, who knows, whatever. Okay, if that's the argument, guess what federal legalization would do? It would make it so that everybody could do that, could be making weed, and then it would literally drop the price to a point where people could consume it, and you'd still probably make tax money or whatever, but people could actually make a profit. Everybody involved, the governments, the farms, the farmers, the shops, the farmers that want to do shops, the shops that just want to be shops, the farmers that just want to farm, the extract guys that just want to press, all of it. All of it could just be fine, and the cartel would move away from it. That's exactly why when alcohol was legalized, the mobsters moved away from it. They no longer sold alcohol anymore, and they moved on to other drugs that were more lucrative. But guess what? What happened if those ones went away? Well, then it would really be difficult for them, wouldn't they? But we're not ready to talk about legalizing all the drugs, right? Because we still have to talk about legalizing cannabis as if it's the fucking craziest thing in the world. And look at these debates and these pictures that are being brought and these talking points that are being brought. And like I said, I agreed with his first statement. I agree. There are much bigger things to be talking about, and it's crazy that this is what you're bringing to the table, sir. I am just appalled.
enforcement officers meet the huge challenge these cartels present. In fact, months ago, I directly asked Attorney General Garland, and again several weeks ago, for his assistance in getting the FBI, Homeland Security, and the DEA to help us in Southern Oregon, and I've heard nothing, absolutely nothing back from him. This is why it's essential that any bill dealing with legalization include significant money for law enforcement.
Of course, you have to do legalization with more money for the police because we need to be able to fight the cartels. This is his narrative. His narrative is that they don't have right now enough money to go fight these cartels. So we need more money for the police. We need more soldiers that execute out our laws, and then we'll be able to finally have legalization once we have more cops.
Yeah, that's what we need. More police.
Not getting any help from the Attorney General. This picture behind me is what it looks what the living conditions are like for the immigrants working for the cartels.
Vice?
Wait. He's saying this. Did you hear that one? What did you say about Vice?
Isn't there an entire police department called Vice that's supposed to deal with the cartels selling illegal drugs, but you don't have enough officers?
Okay, so he said this is the living conditions of these cartel people who are living in squalor and fear. This image is their living conditions. And that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
But again, that still doesn't prove that they're living in squalor and fear, as he said, because I know that like cartel grunts are used to living like this. Like if you've been down to like Juarez, like me and Mr. Gundam have, scenes like this in the desert are like not too uncommon, and like poverty people live like this in like countries. Not to say, of course, I'm not trying to excuse this in any way, not trying to be like, oh yeah, you know, people should be working and treated like mules. I'm just saying in general, like this is happening all over, and this is still just detracting away and creating like a spectacle and some hysteria for this to draw away from the fact that the only reason that this is happening is because there is a federal illegality all across the world on cannabis, and which therefore drives the price up, which therefore draws the criminals who can't do anything else but and who want to make the most money towards the thing that's price is drawn up, and therefore they get into this business in the first place. People like this get into it because it's illegal. If it was legal and cheap and easy to do and legitimate, they would move on to something else, which sucks. But the point is that if you eventually get rid of all the things that they can move on to, then you squeeze them out, and then who knows what they have to do next. I don't know, but that would be the first step to taking down these things. If cartels are truly your worry, much like we've done with Russia, you just squeeze them out financially, and then they kind of don't have any options other than how else are they going to start making money? I don't know.
Right.
We are experiencing one of the worst droughts in the history of the western United States. Water is gold in my district. Cartels are stealing water and using it to grow marijuana. Water regulators in Southern Oregon have been threatened with death by cartel members when they've tried to stop water theft. Here's a picture of some of the stolen water. When the crop is harvested, hoop houses are abandoned. The migrant laborers disappear, and the mess is left for someone else to clean up. Here's what that looks like. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record the Politico article labeled "Why Legal Weed."
Did I not fucking call it? Did I not fucking call that shit? I said he's going to bring up that Politico article. And I said when we literally covered this on the stream super early on, and I said that this article was like was going to be used as a talking point for anti-weed. And the person was like, no, like, I'm like a weed person. Like, no, you're not. It's the same. It's another fucking symposium. But anyway, here we go.
Didn't kill Oregon's black market, dated January 14th, 2022.
Without objection.
It's absolutely essential that any bill legalizing marijuana include significant funding for law enforcement. which will be absolutely and particularly necessary to control the cartels that will flood into farming areas such as Southern Oregon. Simply setting up a penalty.
Guarantee that the right wingers are gonna, when discussing like MDMA therapy and stuff, if these phase 3 trials for MAPS do proceed and they don't get like gutted out by this symposia crusade, if that does happen, I guarantee you that when we're finally at like some federal talk like this about how we're gonna handle like the fact that we're now all using ecstasy therapy, the right wingers are gonna be busting out all of the symposia stuff, guaranteed.
As this bill does.
They're gonna be like, look at all these rapists that exist. They use the MDMA to rape people. I guarantee it. Symposia is gonna be all over the right wing side, even though they claim and on their fucking Twitter that they come from a left leaning side. Guarantee you they're gonna be used as hysteria, just like that Politico article that I called. Yeah, I would bet money on that. Mark it here, chat. Mark it here.
For failing to register will not work without the concurrent means of enforcement. Do not let the defunding the police thinking that currently is in this bill lead the nation into the same ecological, human, and social disaster we now face in Oregon. The bill fails to address impairment. It fails to address the ever-increasing potency of the drug. It fails to address the age at which marijuana can be legally used. It fails to address the impact the bill's 5% and quickly rising to 8% gross receipts tax, when added to the state and local taxes, will have in driving the black market source of marijuana. The federal tax, when added in, will make legal marijuana almost 30% more expensive than that which is on the black market. The bill fails to correctly clarify the differences between marijuana and hemp. This is essential if the hemp market is to be protected from the policies and regulations associated with marijuana.
Why should the hemp market and the marijuana market be associated differently? Because you want to stigmatize THC, but CBD is okay, but they're both fucking cannabinoids, which are both molecules of the same fucking family, and it's all the same plant species. Holy moly, they just really want to demonize the idea of psychoactive effects and of highs. It's almost like they want to push this agenda so that people never change or alter their consciousness and they always stay in one mode.
Yep.
I don't know why they would want to do that, chat. You decide.
This bill is the wrong approach. We should be addressing the crises created by the Biden administration, not passing an incomplete, inadequate, and damaging to our children and communities stimulus marijuana bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would commend the attention of the gentleman to the sections of the bill that deal with all the different problems he raised. I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Tennessee, a member of the committee, Mr. Cohen.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman and I thank Mo for my time. I rise in support of the MORE Act, which would finally reform how we deal with marijuana laws and how we should. Mr. Benz said we should put more money into law enforcement. That's the opposite of what we should do. Decriminalizing means cops spend less time busting people for marijuana possession and more time looking for people committing violent crime.
There we
That's
go.
a better use of law enforcement time.
Yes, sir.
Maurice Henchy and Sam Farr on this side of the aisle knew it when they were here. They sponsored bills, as did Don Young and Dana Rohrabacher on the other side of the aisle, because it was a libertarian freedom issue. It's no secret the war on drugs failed. Harry Anslinger started it in the 1930s, and he vilified Hispanic Americans and said this was a way to get them. And then Richard Nixon even had a commission that said we should decriminalize marijuana, but then decided, because of Ehrlichman and Haldeman, that no, the Nixon strategy was better designed at going after marijuana because blacks and hippies who protested the war were his opponents, and we needed to go after them. So they turned it around. They never legalized, as the commission said they should, and they made the war on drugs worse.
Spin all the facts. Hit him with the war on drugs.
It then went on and on. Marijuana is less dangerous than alcohol. People do not smoke marijuana and beat up their wives, or get angry and beat up others, or drive their cars in wildly dangerous conditions, fast speeds, and kill others. Congress has been out of step on this issue. It's called cultural lag. We're finally coming around to rescheduling it from Schedule 1, where it's in a class with heroin and methamphetamines, which is absurd. We should have research. We must deschedule marijuana. We must decriminalize it at the federal level.
He's still vilifying certain drugs here, which I understand. I mean, people are going to do that.
They're not the issue today.
But yeah,
today is marijuana.
they're also not the
tomorrow is
issue,
meth.
which is good. It's good that we're not focusing on that, unlike the previous speaker who wanted to focus on every other world issue and be like, why are we talking about marijuana? And then proceeds
Why
to
can't
bring a
we
bunch
fight the war in Ukraine.
brings a slideshow with him.
It's like, because if we fought in Ukraine, you idiot, we would go to World War III.
A slideshow full of like spectacle, hysteria, crazy pictures. The most like the craziest picture that he could paint of what legalization leads to.
And a video, which now we can't watch because, they didn't want to let him bring in a video camera, fucking TV.
Yeah. But anyway, Steve Cohen's spitting right now, so let him keep going. We'll ignore the fact that he said that marijuana should not be in that same class as those other things. I do agree with that to a degree, because I don't think there should be any kind of classes as far as these things, but we should recognize effects, and we can definitely recognize the potential harms of each individual thing on its own.
Now is the time to do some remedies to our federal marijuana laws. This is an historic time. I thank Mr. Nadler, Ms. Lee, and the others who've championed this bill, Mr. Blumenauer, and let's move forward and do the right thing. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to mention that I have read the bill very carefully, Chair Nadler, and there is nothing in the bill allocating money to law enforcement. Mr. Chair, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Good.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2
Why
minutes.
the hell should any of it be allocated to law enforcement? We're not talking about the police. We're talking about marijuana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the gentleman from Oregon. Our country continues to suffer under the many crises created by the Biden administration and Democrat policies.
Wait. Again, we're here to talk about weed, and every time we go to the fucking Republican side, the right, every time they start just spewing off about the war and the this and the that. This guy's talking about how the Democrats are the problem and the Biden administration. Like, oh my God, we're here to talk about weed. Fuck.
The border crisis.
Sorry, what was that?
The border crises, yeah.
Here we go. Like I said, we're about to spit off all kinds of other bullshit. Oh my God. They're just like I said, they're literally like little hysteria bots. They just like spout out little like border crisis, the wall, fucking the immigrants, the cartel.
Like, a fucking nightmare, and it should be torn down.
Fuck, man. It's just so cringy almost that they're just so robotic. Like they always have these same, like they never really have. That's the problem with this side of like the conservative side, generally the right. Like they never really have like points. It's always just like resistance, but they never have like any kind of points that they want to make themselves. So they always have to just like set up these like scare stories and like, hey, well, this is why we shouldn't do it, because their position is only ever that we like shouldn't do things. They never like come up with like ways that we should move forward. It's always just resistance to the progress. But anyway, here we go.
Crisis, the crime crisis, the inflation crisis, the energy crisis, and yet the priority of this Congress now turns to expanding access to addictive, behavior-altering recreational drugs.
Oh boy.
At a time when our country is also
addictive, behavior altering,
experiencing increased addiction, depression, and suicide. What's worse, we want to target those individuals and communities who are historically most impacted by the harm of illegal drugs and provide federal funding to help enable criminals to open and operate now legal drug businesses. We have rising violent crime in Democrat-run cities across the country. More drug use won't help that. We have 100,000 Americans die of overdoses last year, the leading cause of death in Americans ages 18 to 45. More drug use won't help that.
Wait. No one died from marijuana use last year.
Come on, guys. No one died from marijuana. So I got literally every other drug.
That's the problem, though. That's why we're gonna make that video, because we really need to talk about why they want to lump all drugs together, because then it makes their talking points like this so easy. But it's not that easy, and that's the point that they refuse to acknowledge.
Look. At Rep Bob Good.
Bob Good.
Oh my God, his name is fucking Bob
His
Good.
name is literally Bob Good.
You know, there was a fucking supervillain called Granny Goodness.
I do.
And she's like a horrible torturer and mind controller.
Yeah, I in Versus system, I played a Dark Side Elite deck, which was like Dark Side and all of his elites, and yeah, I used a lot of Granny Goodness cards, and she was always a pretty good card.
Schools and our education systems are failing us. More drug use won't help that. But in fact,
Oh my God, is this like the little more drug use won't help that? More drug use won't help
put
that.
more money into the schools, and you'll gain more money from all the marijuana revenue you'll be getting, and you could put that into the schools too.
Like, no one is promoting fucking more drug use anyway. No one's saying more drug use is the answer. We're literally saying decriminalize it. Stop locking people in cages. War on drugs. And this guy's like, more drug use won't help all the other problems of the world. That's his whole argument, is literally just that more drug use, which isn't the same as the other drugs that he's talking about. Not that I'm vilifying those other drugs, but they're literally just not the same at all. But he's trying to lump it all together so that he can basically do this scare story of, look at all the death that's coming from drugs. Marijuana is like those things, because remember, they're all scheduled together because we have no idea about science. And so we need to treat them all the same. Yeah.
this legislation has no prohibitions on edible forms of marijuana, flavored vape products, or other efforts to target specifically teens and young people.
Wait. So adults aren't allowed to like flavors?
No.
Adults aren't allowed to like vape
No.
products?
No.
Those are specifically kid things. Vapes are for kids, apparently. He's the one admitting that himself. He's the one promoting that vapes are a kid thing. That's his own, like, who said that they're a kid thing? Well, I've never seen a single vaporizer be like, hey, look, kids.
Right? They can't even get in for most marijuana stores.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we have surrendered operational control of our southern border to the Mexican crime cartels. And we've got fentanyl and other dangerous drugs streaming into our country at historic levels because of this president's open border policies. Of course, what
you've got them. I mean, you had a problem with them, though, the whole time. It's just now a problem for you. I mean, they've been there. Even if Biden didn't open the border, the cartels have been coming in and out all the time.
Right. They own that border.
Yeah, they've always owned it, you guys, because it's a gigantic border. We have a giant border.
The cartel has a ridiculous amount of money. You think they can't pay off an agent, a border patrol agent?
Fuck, they used to dig tunnels under us.
They own their government. They're able to pay off politicians in their country and policemen and all these things. You think they can't buy off a border patrol agent and get the pass?
Yeah, you think so? You think there's no dirty border patrol agents? You're wrong.
But anyway, this guy's trying to bring it all into fentanyl too. He's all trying to be that. Well, look, the cartels exist and fentanyl exists. And what does it have to do with marijuana? You cannot directly link marijuana use or marijuana existence or people using marijuana to any of this shit that you're talking about, bro.
Solution. Let's end Title 42, which is predicted to increase the daily crossings from the current 7,000 a day to as much as 18,000 a day. That's over 500,000 a month. How might this impact the illegal drug trade across our country? Law enforcement tells me that legalizing marijuana will force the criminal element to redouble their efforts into hard, more dangerous drugs to replace the profit that's been lost from marijuana.
So what he's saying is that a government organization is telling him,
another government organization.
But yes, but the government organization is the police telling him, the police who need their jobs, who like beating up on fucking immigrants and shit, and whoever's just trying to make a buck selling weed, that they like to keep their jobs where they're just beating our heads in. And he's like, no, we need to keep their jobs. That's why they're telling. You realize that one of the reasons that weed got illegalized in the first place was it was racist, but the public went with it because it was racist.
Yeah, or at least
Because
the public side of it who
racist.
were racist. Yeah, the public that
They
was
were
racist.
fear-mongered into like some crazy race, fueled by their own racism, into demonizing marijuana.
Right. And to his point here again, what he says here, there is some validity to that. You're right. If we do legalize or decriminalize marijuana,
Because it was all demonized that way because the FDA wanted more funding. So they had to criminalize some shit.
yeah. So with Bob Good, what he, like I said, what he just said right now, if we were to take that and run with it, let's run with Bob Good's logic here. So if we were to legalize cannabis, the cartels and the drug dealers would move on. What was that?
Jesus. No, that was my phone.
The cartels and drug dealers would move on to supposedly more dangerous drugs. You're right. That's true. They would move on to the things that are illegal. So let's use that logic that he just said and take it a step further. Okay, so what would they move into? He said they would probably move into like heroin or cocaine. Okay, so then let's legalize those. Okay, well then they'll move to like fentanyl and you know, methamphetamine and
fentanyl is a legal drug.
right, it is a legal drug. Exactly.
Unless you are going to criminalize legal drugs now.
But then they're gonna right. No, I'm with you. But just through finishing my point, yeah, if you have to eventually realize that if you keep legalizing all of them, then what are they going to do? What are they going to do, Bob? What does your study say about that? If we were to legalize all drugs, then what would they have to move to? What kind of crazy, lucrative, criminal activity would they move to? What would be next?
Weapon dealers.
Weapon dealers? Well, that's what we're doing. That's what Walmart's a weapons dealer.
Yeah, but they're a legal weapons dealer.
Right. Well, then.
Yeah, the gun store is a legal weapons dealer. But we're talking about the illegal arm trades. That means selling to countries or selling the army surplus craziness.
Yeah, but I don't know if the cartel is able to just construct guns. And if they are, I mean, wouldn't they just be moving that kind of stuff now?
They are. There is.
Yeah, I mean, there's
cartels that-
definitely like illegal gun trade happening now, but I don't know that that would become their like primary source of income.
That's what he's saying. It would have to become if we just legalize all drugs. Well, that's what I'm saying. It would probably have to go. It would have to be something super lucrative. And the most lucrative thing I can think of after illegal drugs is weapons.
Illegal weapons.
Like bombs and shit. They would have to get like super explosives and Jericho missiles and fucking Iron Man armor.
Yeah, but then you can go after them as war criminals. And again, that's still just a thing on all the way our justice system works. It still doesn't have anything to do with the fact that these drugs should not all be legalized, because then you do gut their finances. You do force them into other corners that you can then go after them in a more effective way, in which you're not causing harm by legalizing these substances. In fact, you are reducing harm.
Yep.
You can also look at the states that have already legalized it, and you can see the increased addiction,
Gentleman's
dependency,
time has
and
expired.
homelessness
Good,
that
thank
that
Gentleman's
God.
time has
Yeah,
expired.
Bob,
We should be
good
ashamed
out of
of
here.
ourselves for
The
Shut up,
gentleman's
Bob.
time has
and not
expired.
oppose this bill.
Shut up, Bob. Go away. You're done.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Oregon reserves. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to distinguished Chairman of the Democratic Caucus, Mr. Jeffries.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the distinguished chairman for yielding and for his tremendous leadership, as well as all of my colleagues who have worked on the MORE Act. Richard Nixon began the failed war on drugs a little over 50 years ago in 1971. At the time, there were less than 3.
Richard Nixon, this is a false narrative, by the way, Chad. Just remember, the left isn't always right either. The left isn't always right. How funny. But
No, it's not funny. It's just coincidental.
yeah, but that's what makes it so funny. But point being, this is not entirely true. It is true that Richard Nixon coined the phrase and popularized the phrase, the war on drugs. He might have not even been the one to coin it, but like definitely popularized it and pushed it.
No, I feel like the war on drugs was created. The actual coined phrase "war on drugs" was
Might have been in some journalism.
no, the other one. That guy.
Anslinger?
No, the one before Nixon.
Oh.
Reagan.
No, Reagan was after Nixon.
Reagan. Nixon?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
God damn.
Yeah, the Reagan just expanded upon the war on drugs. Nixon was the one that like started it off. But anyway, that's what I'm saying. He didn't technically start it off, because we've had prohibition laws since like the 1910s, and we had cocaine laws. We had prohibition happen. They didn't call it the war on drugs, but prohibition was the same thing that's happening now. It was the same thing. It was the war on drugs. It was the war on alcohol. We've had a war on tobacco for a long time. We've had a war on cocaine. Like I said, cocaine goes all the way back, and opium and cocaine go all the way back, like I said, to like the 1910s or even a little earlier. So we've had prohibition for forever.
Nixon was the 37th president, and Reagan was the 40th president.
Yeah.
Why do I always think Reagan's older?
He might have been older during his term.
He looks super old.
Yeah.
100,000 Americans incarcerated in this country. Today, there are 2.3 million, disproportionately Black and Latino. Many of those individuals who have been incarcerated are there because of non-violent drug offenses, often marijuana possession and use. The United States of America incarcerates more people than any other country in the world, including per capita China and Russia combined. That's
true.
a stain
That's shitty.
on our democracy.
It is a
We
shit
have an
stain.
overcriminalization problem in America. We have a mass incarceration problem in America. We have a prison industrial complex in America.
We do.
It doesn't advance public safety, and it hurts economic development. It has ruined individuals, ruined lives, ruined families, and ruined communities, particularly in communities of color. It's time to end the federal cannabis prohibition. It's time to deschedule it. It's time to decriminalize marijuana. It's time to invest in communities in a way that makes sense, both from a public safety standpoint as well as a fairness, equity, and justice standpoint. It's time to pass the MORE Act. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman
Okay.
from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to mention that there's about $400 million that would have been raised last year under this bill had this tax been in place, and none of that money goes to public safety. It goes to rebuild community space, but not public safety. With that, I yield.
How does rebuilding community space not increase public safety? How does better communities as a whole not increase mental health, which decreases the likelihood that people are going to do like shitty things to themselves or to others? How does that not increase public safety?
Right.
Yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter.
I thank the gentleman for
from
yielding. Mr.
Georgia.
Speaker.
Gentleman for Georgia.
Oh my
is
God, this guy's
recognized
yelling.
for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, what do you got to
Mr.
say?
Speaker, how is it that we here in Congress, in the face of all the domestic and international crises that we are facing right now, that we're here talking about decriminalizing and descheduling marijuana?
Okay, so he just literally summarized the last two guys' talking points of, with all these crises, why are we talking about marijuana? That was literally, as we've said, the last two guys, same fucking point. He just took all of the like spectacle out of it and just summarized it real quickly. And you're right, dude. Once again, you're right. Why are we talking about marijuana? We shouldn't be talking about this. This is a no-brainer. We should have already legalized it a long time ago. We should have already decriminalized it. We shouldn't be talking about this shit. We should just fucking legalize.
Damn, you really like that meme I sent you, didn't you?
We're all going to go home this weekend. And what are our constituents going to be talking about? They're going to be talking about the price of gas. They're going to be talking about the price of food. They're going to be talking about the price that they have to pay to heat their homes. They're going to...
And that's fine that that's what they're going to be talking about. But at the same time, like, he's ignoring the fact that there's going to be people who are going home and be like, Dad's still locked up. Dad's still locked up for weed. And we can't pay the fucking bills. What about those people? What about those homes? Oh, no, just the Buddy Carter homes, the ones that have, you know, plenty of money and never have to worry about anything. Those kinds of homes are the ones that he's talking about. Those are the people he wants to protect, not the other kind of homes.
No.
turn on the TV, and what are they going to see? They're going to see in real time Ukrainians being bombed by Russia, fleeing for their life. And what are we doing here in Congress? Talking about marijuana? You got to be kidding me. Mr. Speaker, as you know, I'm a pharmacist. I know addiction.
Are
know,
you? Wait.
And I've
Hold up. Hold up. You don't have to know addiction to be a pharmacist.
Let me tell you, chat, I am a retarded cyborg. And I have seen addiction firsthand. I have seen it several times in several people. I know addiction. The exact same, probably better than he does. So I've dealt with those people.
But even then, like you yourself, right? Would you say
I've
that
never
you
been addicted.
have you been addicted to a drug?
No, I've never been addicted.
Right.
I actually have a tolerance
So then
to
you can't.
chemicals, to chemical addiction.
Um, I don't know if I agree with you that you have a tolerance, but sure, if that's what you want to call it. But yeah, I would say that you don't have that issue, and so like you can't know what it's like to have that issue. Does that make sense? Like you know what you've seen, and you're empathetic, and you're you can absorb around you, but like to truly know is to go through it. And this guy is trying to say that because he's a pharmacist who went to school and learned about what he was told addiction is, that makes him an addiction expert, and that he knows it, that he truly knows it, but he's never been addicted in his life. The reason that I love listening to people like Hamilton Morris and Carl Hart is because these guys actually use the substances that they talk about. So when they're talking about what it's doing to them, I at least know that it's coming from the mouth of someone who's used it. In fact, Carl Hart himself got him just to do a panel in which he was speaking upon opiate addiction and withdrawal. He himself got himself dependent upon opiates and then made himself go cold turkey so that he could experience the withdrawal symptoms. And he timed it perfectly so that he would be just at the very tail end of his withdrawal symptoms as he gave that speech at the panel, and was able to talk about it from the perspective literally of someone who had just gone through it and recorded all of his results. That is the kind of person I would listen to if he says that he truly knows addiction, not this guy.
Studied addiction. I can tell you, marijuana is nothing more than a gateway drug.
He literally just said, I studied addiction. The school book told me how it works.
Gateway
it leads to other, harder drugs. Don't try to justify this by saying, oh, alcohol's a drug and it's legalized.
It is!
That's not what we do. That makes no sense whatsoever.
Wait, what? That's not what we do. Well, yeah, I know that's not what we do. But it does make sense. It doesn't make sense to you.
Right? If it doesn't make sense to him, it doesn't make sense to nobody.
He's literally trying to destroy that. That's exactly what we're going to talk about in that video too. But that's literally what he's trying to destroy, is like that whole argument of like, well, alcohol's a drug, and so why is that? And he's like, well, no, we don't talk about that because that's not what we do.
Mr. Speaker, we had a hearing in the Energy and Commerce Committee. We had 10 parents before us whose children had died due to opioid addiction.
Opioids.
Not 8 out of 10, not 9 out of 10, but 10 out of 10 of those
Also,
parents
why?
said
Why was that in the Energy and Commerce?
No, he's about to make his point right here. He's making the point.
Commerce Committee. We had 10 parents before us whose children had died due to opioid addiction. Not 8 out of 10, not 9 out of 10, but 10 out of 10 of those parents said they smoked marijuana.
That's his point.
Okay.
Yeah. So his point is that because they smoked marijuana sometime in their life, according to their parents, he's trying to say that is the slippery slope that then led to their opiate addiction. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That's the most ridiculous thing that he said. He's saying that it's ridiculous what's being said, but he is the one being ridiculous. I don't understand that slippery slope argument whatsoever. It's just a tried and true gateway drug nonsense. And it's just literally, it's not based in any kind of logic. I'm sure that there were so many other conditions that led to these children making those mistakes, and we don't, like, were the drugs tainted? He doesn't say anything about that. We don't know. We don't know how bad was it for these children that they ended up abusing. There's just so much to take in here, but he, of course, just wants to blame it on the fact that they tried marijuana according to their parents, and so therefore he can connect marijuana to opiate addiction.
To begin with, 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10 times it happened. That he's basically saying, look, my sample size of 10 that I asked, and here's this perfect story that gives me a 100% proof rate.
Leads to harder drugs. This is not a Republican Democrat situation here.
It leads to harder drugs.
This is an American problem. You know that we had 100,000.
We're an American problem.
Do you use harder drugs by chance, Mr. Gundam? We smoke weed every day on here, but I know I don't use those what substances they call harder drugs. Do you?
No, they're not for me.
Has this gateway been open for you?
No, not for me. No, thank you.
That gateway hasn't been open for me either. So it's really weird how all of these people go up here and they claim that everyone who uses the substance that you and I use start using these other things, and yet we've never used these things.
Yeah, no.
Isn't that funny? How he's speaking for every American, and yet here you and I are, two living proof members of society who just come here and do nothing but smoke cannabis and have not taken that gateway into this realm that he says that it guarantees 10 out of 10 times will lead to.
Is Georgia legal right now?
Oh, God, no. I don't think so. Maybe medically. Maybe medically, if you want to look that up.
Yeah.
Americans die of overdose last year. Mr. Speaker, this is misguided. This is wrong. This is not what we should do.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Hammer him
Gentleman
down.
yields back. Gentleman from Oregon reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Rhode Island, a member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Cicilline.
Gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the MORE Act, legislation that takes an important step in rectifying some of the harm caused by the failed war on drugs. The enforcement of marijuana laws has been a major driver of mass incarceration in the United States. Hundreds of thousands of people are arrested each year for marijuana-related charges, very often just possession.
Pause. So Georgia is medical CBD oil only.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Has in turn led to our federal prison system operating at 103% of capacity. And too many of these offenders are serving time for nonviolent drug-related crimes. A drug-related conviction, even for possession, can be devastating for the rest of a person's life, making it difficult or even impossible to vote, get a job, be approved for a loan, or even qualify for a government program. And as we know, these consequences have had massively disproportionate impact on communities of color, as Chairman Jeffries just mentioned. And this current system, frankly, doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense, not for community safety, not for the functioning of an effective prison system, and not for successful rehabilitation. By removing marijuana from the federal controlled substances list, allowing for the expulsion of marijuana offenses, and providing support to communities most impacted by the failed war on drugs, the MORE Act is a long overdue step in restoring justice and reversing the harms caused by the war on drugs. I want to thank Chairman Nadler for his extraordinary leadership on this issue. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this legislation and to support it here today. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting yes and reversing the gross injustice that the war on drugs has produced and bring sensible policy back into place. And I again want to end by thanking everyone who's worked on this for so many years, but particularly our chairman for his passionate and strong leadership. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman from Rhode Island yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Big.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 4 mininutes.
Thanks,
4
Mr.
minutes for
Speaker.
this
It's
guy.
great to be here. I got a kick out of the gentleman from Tennessee showing his age. He's talking about pot when it was 2% THC. He's thinking pot's still this drug where people...
Oh, we've already debunked this fucking Kevin Sabet talking point, but here we go. Here it is again.
Get goofy and they eat Cheetos and nacho cheese Doritos.
Oh my God.
He's not talking about the 99%.
Code monkey like Fritos. Code monkey like Tab and Mountain Dew.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. Look at this face.
Whoa.
THC pot that's being sold in some of these states where they've legalized recreational pot. So I think that's really fun and anachronistic. Very good to go back and think about how
Time
things
is
were in
now.
the late 60s, early 70s. But let's talk about, how about a Mother Jones article that I have before me where they are analyzing the use of pot, and they're talking about, hey, look, this is what happens. You start seeing paranoia and psychosis come in, and they're referring to New Zealand studies, long-term longitudinal studies about the dangers of pot. That's interesting. We're not going to even talk about that because we don't have time to talk about that because we're focusing here on descheduling marijuana. And what that does is that incentivizes marijuana use and distribution. But this bill is also reckless in its approach, provides no limits on or requirements to clearly identify the potency of marijuana or its extracts or concentrates. In 95, for instance, the THC concentration was about 4% on average. Today, it goes between 20 and 99.
That's not true at all. I mean, the second part of today, it was 20 to 99% is true. But THC has been going easily into the 60 or 70% at least, probably since the days of like the Egyptians. So this guy just has no idea what he's talking about, and neither does Kevin Sabet, because that's one of his main constant talking points. Same for Every Brain Matters, I believe. Dr. Eric Voth also likes to spout that, and just so you know, chat, it's all lies. Hash is concentrated. Hash has existed since, like I said, early times. Ancient Egypt, early China. Hash has been around for a long time. The Hashishans in the Middle East. Yeah, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. Hash has never been 2%. If concentrated marijuana has ever tested out at 2%, that literally just blows my fucking mind that someone could make hash that poorly that it would test at 2%. But I guarantee you that the average hash maker at any given time was making at least hash that could be hitting the 40 or 50% at minimum.
9%. It also doesn't deal with what the Surgeon General says needs to be the case, that the age limit should be under age 25. This doesn't get into any age limit. Doesn't cover that, yet that's what the Surgeon General says. In fact, the Surgeon General's advisory says human brain continues to develop from birth into the mid-20s, vulnerable to the effects of addictive substances, I don't know, like marijuana. In fact, it goes on to say frequent marijuana use during adolescence is associated with changes in the areas of the brain involving attention, memory, decision-making, and motivation. Adolescent marijuana use is associated with declines in IQ, school performance and attendance, and life satisfaction, increased rates of suicide attempts. And you know what this bill does? It's a lot of fun, folks. What it does is says, you can distribute this under federal law anyway, you can distribute this to an 11-year-old kid. 11-year-old kid's going to have marijuana, be able to use it. You can't do anything to them here for that, that's for sure. But what it does do is it creates a tax crime. So you get rid of your marijuana crime, creates some tax crimes, and we all know how great the tax code is for being ease of use and understanding. Section 3 of the bill removes marijuana from the Schedule of Controlled Substances Act. It would no longer be a federal crime to possess or sell marijuana, including to 11-year-olds. Section 5, however, puts it into the tax code. I think there's another fun aspect here. It talks about 600,000 arrests annually, yet the reality is that's for state and local crimes. In fact, there were 1,100 marijuana convictions in 2020. You know what those, under federal law, you know what those convictions were? Those were for transport distribution. Yeah, now you're not going to be able to get to anybody for that. So let's talk about how well this has worked in the LA Times pieces that talk about this. LA Times does a massive expose. And what do they find out? They say Prop 64 was going to solve all these problems. Solve the problems. Instead, what you have are thousands of illegal grow dispensaries.
Same fucking talking points. Here we go. Okay, yes. Fucking legalizing marijuana in one single state is not going to stop all of the drug trade all over the world. The only way to do that is worldwide legalization of all drugs. True decriminalization of all of it is the only way to, and regulated supply in which they don't have to go to the cartels to get all of this stuff. That's the only way to end that, to truly end that. But this argument that the cartels move in is just, it doesn't make any sense. And if they are moving in and that they're only growing weed, like, thank God, honestly.
Why? Because they have a Byzantine code like what these guys are setting up here today. And so you have a crisis in LA County, San Bernardino County, and also in Riverside County. Those grow farms use forced labor, as Mr. Benz so eloquently talked about, the Oregon grow farms. These are being run in Southern California by the cartels who originate in Mexico, Ukraine, Russia, Bulgaria, and China. Yeah, that's what you're going to do. You're going to federalize this. Well done. This is a piece of garbage. I oppose this legislation, and I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields
Jesus
back.
Christ.
Gentleman from Oregon
Arizona.
reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, a member of the Judiciary Committee.
Texas is speaking on behalf of marijuana.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the Speaker. I thank the lead sponsor, Chairman Nadler, for problem solving. Blumenauer and Cohen and Congresswoman Lee and all of those who galvanized all of us and was pleased to be able to lead this through the crime subcommittee. The war on drugs simply failed. And I'm glad that one interpretation that has just been evidenced by my good friend on the other side of the aisle will have little weight and little basis. Because what we're doing here is solving a problem. Let me just indicate from the health affairs culture of health, a black person is still nearly 4 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis possession than a white person. To summarize this bill, it deals with federal decriminalization, taxation, and expungement. It does not stop the DA, Department of Justice, the FBI, or anyone else from doing its job. The bill would remove marijuana as a cannabis from the list or schedule of federally controlled substances. This means that going forward, individuals can no longer be prosecuted federally for marijuana offenses. This does not mean that marijuana would now be legal throughout the United States. The bill would simply remove the federal government from the business of prosecuting marijuana cases, which would leave the question of legality to individual states. 47 states already have some form of legal use of marijuana. So let me share, my friends, the points that they're going to make. The bill was designed to help individuals who have been caught up in the criminal justice system for possessing small amounts of marijuana for personal use. It was not designed to help drug traffickers. By the way, the president has given over $1 billion to Ukraine as one of the steadfast leaders and has galvanized NATO and our allies, and not one of us needs to challenge the president or any one of us in our fight to help Ukraine. And let me make it very clear about crime. Read the president's budget. He has a massive piece in there to reduce crime. It's everywhere, including rural America, where Republicans say they are. But I don't look at it that way. It's Americans. We stand together. This bill is about America. The expungement provisions are limited to nonviolent marijuana possession convictions that is loaded up our federal prisons. If an individual has other criminal convictions in addition to a covered nonviolent offense, marijuana offense, the bill already includes a stated exemption for drug kingpins, meaning anyone who received an increased sentence for being a leader or organizer of drug trafficking will not qualify for expungement. And once this bill is passed, it would enable individuals to possess and use marijuana for personal use. Marijuana will be regulated as a commodity, but let me tell you what else will happen. We'll be able to research. The scientists will be able to study what is happening to our young people, our juveniles, if that is the case. We have a definitive position in there about helping those who may become addicted. We do not overlook those who might as well be using it.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
So,
Gentlelady's
let us go forward on this
time
bill.
has
I
expired.
ask support for the bill. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2.5 minutes to the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Palazzo.
Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized for 2.5 minutes, did you say? All right.
Yes. Well, thank you, Representative Bentz, and for the time. And Mr. Speaker, our country is facing a national security crisis, an energy crisis, a border crisis, and an economic crisis.
Oh
but
my
here we are
fucking
voting on
God.
cannabis legislation.
Can't fucking keep
How is
doing
this helping
this.
our constituents?
Every one of these ones just talks about every other issue that has nothing to do with cannabis and tries to link cannabis to. They either try to do that to minimize the fact that cannabis is even being brought up, which, like I said, only hurts their argument, because if you want to minimize it, then you're agreeing that it shouldn't be a big deal legalizing it. Or, I mean, that's obviously a pretty far stretch of what that should mean. But the argument could then definitely be made that if it's not something that we should be talking about, that's the whole point. The whole point is that if we get rid of these things as criminal acts, we can focus on the bigger, more threatening, immediate dangers of the world.
Who are paying sky-high prices at the gas pump. How does this strengthen our military and help secure America? How does this address Biden's record-breaking surge of illegal immigrants at our southern border?
What does this have to do with
How does this help us to leave a stronger, safer, more secure America for our children and our children's children? Simple answer, it doesn't. We are here today to vote to get America high. In states with legalized marijuana, there are more marijuana-related emergency room visits and hospitalizations.
Get America high.
Get America high again. Give me one of those hats.
Okay.
In any other category. Patients in a study using marijuana to treat pain, anxiety, and depression failed to report improved symptoms, and the continued use of marijuana brought risk of addiction known as cannabis abuse disorder.
Oh, here we go.
The National Institute on Drug Abuse found that about 30% of marijuana users have some form of use disorder. In Colorado, the Speaker's home state, and the leading state for legalizing marijuana, there was a 25% increase in CUD among 12 to 17-year-olds. These are our children. Allowing children who don't know how to rationalize long-term effects of drugs to use a gateway drug for recreational or medicinal purposes is reckless, negligent, careless, and
or medicinal purposes. So he's like, fuck you, kids with the seizures. Fuck you.
Irresponsible. No, I will not. The MORE Act does not responsibly end federal prohibition of cannabis. The MORE Act does not end the war on drugs. All it does is poison our children and weaken our society. This flawed legislation is not time sensitive.
Okay, but ending the war on drugs would then do what? You realize that would then, your kids would then be able to get a hold of cannabis, right? So
that's what he doesn't want. He doesn't want his kids to get a hold of cannabis.
Right, but he's literally saying this doesn't end the war on drugs, that all it does is do this. So, okay, well then what does end the war on drugs? If that's what he wants, if he wants the war on drugs to fucking end, okay, well you're right, this doesn't end the war on drugs. Let's legalize it all, dude.
All right, are you prepared to propose legislation to end the war on drugs, sir? Or the war on all the drugs?
Right.
I would like to end the war on all the drugs.
I agree. If you want to scrap this paper and move on to that, let's do it.
Does not require consideration this week and should not take priority over the various serious issues our country currently faces.
Which one?
I urge my colleagues to vote against this bill and put our children first, not the dope dealers. I yield back.
Oh my
Gentleman
God.
yields back. Gentleman
Our
from Oregon
children
reserves.
first, not the dope dealers.
Dope?
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Which one is dope? There's so many names for everything.
There's a reason for that, but it's the same thing. There's dope. Dope can mean all kinds of stuff. That's why like dope sick is about opiates. And dope, I think, usually is supposed to mean like opiates, but it's used for marijuana. It's used for all kinds of drugs. Like it's another one of the, it's like a slang word for drug, and drug itself is almost a slang word. So it's just, it's mucky for a reason. Like it's just one of these words that they can use to describe almost any drug that they want at any given time.
And Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Correa.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of the MORE Act. This legislation is a very simple but very important piece of legislation. It does three basic things. Number one, it legalizes cannabis by removing it from the Controlled Substance Act. Number two, it establishes a process to expunge cannabis-related convictions. And number three, it taxes cannabis. And Mr. Speaker, it is time.
I don't like that last one.
It is time. 37 states in our nation have already legalized cannabis.
I mean, I guess it's going to tax it in general because you're always going to have a sales tax. But I don't think that you should add like extra taxes like they do with alcohol and cigarettes and other things. But I'm sure they're going to do it. If they do, if we do get federal legalization, they're going to.
They're probably going to do it to cannabis.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to do it.
Even Canada has legalized cannabis, and other nations around the world are legalizing cannabis. And even the Israelis are selling cannabis-related medicine. It's time, Mr. Speaker. But this is just the start. Cannabis farmers can't enroll in crop insurance. They can't receive the official organic designation, and they can't access USDA programs. Mr. Speaker, it's well beyond time. Please vote for this legislation. Vote for common sense. Let's vote for the MORE Act. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in response to this bill helping farmers, I just want to say it does not. What it does is it puts a tax on top of that which their product, when added to the Oregon tax, would be almost 30%. That does not encourage farmers to raise the crop because they can't compete against the black market. There has to be far more thought given to what will be an 8% additional cost. By the way, it's a gross receipts tax. It's on top of the gross receipts, not that net profit that you're supposed to get. And secondly, the bill as written fails to distinguish between hemp and marijuana. This must be done if folks,
it's all cannabis.
Folks in each space are going to properly grow. And with that, I reserve.
No, they can both grow without that.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished Majority Leader of the House, Mr. Hoyer.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 1 minute.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, he's going up.
Who's going up?
He's going up to the stand.
Speaker. Chairman
Look at
Nadler.
this old fucking guy.
This guy looks
Ranking
like
members.
fucking Alfred. Like
This
from
is an
Batman.
important piece of legislation.
Gives me Alfred vibes.
How do I know that? Because the people have told us that. Every time they've had the
His name is
opportunity to
Stanley.
vote in America, they have voted to do this.
Wait, what? Who's voted to do this?
They know that filling our prisons and creating criminal records for people who use marijuana.
Yeah.
And knowing full well that if they're people of color, the possibilities of adverse consequences are geometrically greater.
Only because that's your racist cops acting out their racism.
Yeah.
And I want to tell my colleagues, I'm tired of hearing this argument.
Oh.
That, oh my goodness, we're doing this. We ought to be doing something else.
Yeah, we should.
We are all working on the issues of great concern, not only to us, but to the global community.
Right.
On the war in Ukraine, on the criminal activities that Putin is subjecting us to.
He's not
On
subjecting
inflation,
us to
a
it.
critical problem for all of our people.
No, he suggests.
working on that.
I mean, sure, the Ukrainians are the
We're
ones
having
taking
trouble
we're
getting some
witnessing
legislation in the
it, and
Senate
it's pretty horrific.
that will bring down inflation and bring
Right.
down the cost for the American people. Not on our side of the aisle. So when I hear this argument, oh, we ought to be doing this, we ought to be doing that, we ought to be doing the other, this is an important, fair piece of legislation, fair for the American people. So I thank Chairman Nadler. I thank the Judiciary Committee. thank members on my side of the aisle. I thank Barbara Lee, who's walking down the aisle right now, who's worked so hard on this. Why has she worked so hard on it? Because she knows the extraordinary unfairness of the application of existing laws. You don't have to argue that. Just look at the statistics. And you find that to be the case.
What? Guy has
Chairman
like
Nadler has
not
long
brought
been a champion
anything
of
forward.
decriminalizing marijuana and addressing the systemic injustices and inequities resulting from the war on drugs. I was a supporter of the war on drugs. I've been here a long time.
That's not surprising.
Does look like he's been there a long time.
Yeah.
Like the gentleman who spoke about this is a gateway drug. It's not a gateway drug. I've been convinced of that. Marijuana has been legalized in 19 states. That's 40% of our states, save one. And the District of Columbia. And medical marijuana is legal in 36 states. So this is not out of the ordinary. This is what the American people tell us they think is the appropriate thing to do.
That's true.
Now, for some in this House, those who are treated with inequality, particularly in this area, you're on your own. You know, make it out for yourself. We're not going to address it because we have other issues. Of course we have other issues, and we pass bills on those. Unfortunately, not with much support from the other side of the aisle. Despite the changes in state laws and social norms around the usage of marijuana, its use remains illegal under federal law. The gentleman who is presiding over the House today comes from a state that has said that's not good policy. Now, that's not some wacko coastal state. It's Colorado.
He's saying that the coastal states are wacko.
Despite changes in state laws and social norms, as I have said, its use remains illegal under federal law, often resulting in devastating consequences. Hear me, my colleagues, devastating consequences for Black, Latino, and Native communities. Now, I'm not any of those. And I would tell you, a lot of my colleagues, and now when I was in college in the 1800s, it was alcohol. It was alcohol. We were not the generation of drugs. It was alcohol.
Alcohol is a drug.
And it devastated the lives of literally hundreds of thousands of young people.
No, it didn't. And it isn't.
But nobody cried out to make it illegal. They had tried that, of course, in the 20s.
They did make it
According
illegal
to
in
the
the
Center for
20s.
American
They didn't try that. They fucking did.
Progress. Black Americans are 4 times more likely than white Americans to be arrested for marijuana possession, even though they use it at similar rates. And the gentleman who spoke says, why are we dealing with this? For the same reason our founders said that we believe in equality, that all men, and they surely would add women today, are created equal and ought to be treated fairly and equally. 4 times more convictions and prosecutions for people of color. That's why we're dealing with this, because it's unfair in America. Those criminal records can haunt people of color and impact the trajectory of their lives and careers indefinitely. And I regret that there are some members of our Congress who apparently think that's not worthy of attention.
True.
It can result in difficulty in finding employment, difficulty in finding housing, denial of access to government benefits, denial of financial aid at colleges and universities, and denial of the right to vote. That's why we're dealing with this, because the adverse consequences to people are substantial and negative not only for them but for our country. The legislation before us would remove marijuana from the list of scheduled substances under the Controlled Substances Act, allowing our police department, which we want to fund, by the way, so get off that line that we want to defund the police.
You want to fund it.
I don't want the police funded.
Allow our police departments to focus on serious crimes.
I agree with that one.
The legislation before us would remove marijuana from that list.
Good.
The bill already, by the way, includes a requirement that a study be conducted to understand the societal impacts of decriminalizing marijuana, including the impact on juveniles, education, transportation, veterans, employment, and many others. This bill also expunges the records of individuals convicted of non-violent, let me repeat that, non-violent cannabis offenses and provides resources for job training, reentry services, and youth recreation and mentoring programs. Now, if you take the position that all of these people are on their own and want no help from us or get no help from us, then perhaps you don't care. This bill also addresses the disproportionate economic impact of the war on drugs by providing access to small business grants, opening up the legal marketplace to communities that have been largely excluded.
Yeah, what he's talking about here, and we've talked about it a little bit right now, or a little bit on the show, but right now it's basically impossible if you don't come from a lot of money or you don't have some kind of angel investor, trust fund, kid that you know or something to start a legal cannabis business. The hoops and the amount of costs that you have to jump through and deal with are just really insane. And in some states, I believe you even had to have like $500,000 in your company bank account just to even apply. So yeah, it's pretty crazy that you can't go like any other business. You can go to a bank and you can get a business loan, but in cannabis, because it's illegal, you can't just go get a business loan for cannabis like you can with anyone else. So you literally have to either already have a shit ton of money, or you have to find someone who's willing to invest in you, which then takes away, of course, your ownership.
Yep.
This bill is a matter of justice and equal opportunity. It's about addressing systemic inequities and reforming our criminal justice system so that Americans and America can become a better, stronger, more fair, and more just America. That's why we're spending time on this bill today. I want to thank my friend one more time, Chairman Nadler, for his leadership on this bill. I also want to thank Mr. Neal for helping us get this bill to the floor. I also like to thank Barbara Lee, my dear friend. Barbara Lee and I work and have been working for some years now on how to lift people out of poverty into the middle class. We talk a lot about the middle class. The way you grow the middle class is lift people who aren't in it, so they can contribute to making a better, stronger America.
We shouldn't have
this
class.
bill will help that because it will take the stigma away from 4 times as many people of color being stigmatized by our laws. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, support this bill. The people of Mississippi supported this bill when they went to the polls and voted, not on this bill, that's not accurate, but on the decriminalization of marijuana, because they knew that it was neither necessary to be criminalized and they knew the adverse impacts. I don't ask you to support something the people of California did or the people of New York or even Maryland. But think about supporting the people of Mississippi. who voted on a policy that would make a fairer and more just America. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to mention that it was noted that whenever asked, the people have said that they would support legalization of marijuana. That's not correct. North Dakota Measure 3 failed. Missouri Proposition C to legalize marijuana failed. Ohio Issue 3 failed.
Those measures failed not because that people didn't want marijuana legalized, but most of those bills had a bunch of like monopoly shit and other just like they weren't very well thought out. So the people didn't legalize it in that way. Also, just because there are more conservative states doesn't mean that it doesn't change the fact that the majority of the country has already legalized in some way, and people have been using in the country for way longer than that.
Yep.
With that, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise today to offer a motion to recommit on behalf of the members of our communities who have.
So why did that other guy, though? I'm not too familiar with these political debates, honestly. Do you know why that other guy got like a whole ass filibuster?
Yeah. So, basically, your representatives, right? They're like, okay, so we give time to this person, and so those people have 30 minutes to say their case, and they can save their time or yield their time.
Yeah, but that guy that just went up to the front, he got like a shitload of time, I feel like he went on long. I'm just curious because these other guys were like getting only a few minutes. And he got to just go up to the podium and do a whole ass like filibuster. I am not a political brain, chat, so just so you know, I'm coming in this just for my takes on the drug legalization, but I will definitely always be willing to educate myself, and if we get political people in here in the chat one day and they want to let us know how this works, or if you want to comment on on the video on this, let us know.
Substance use disorder, SUD. Prior to the COVID-19 public health emergency, our country faced a different kind of enemy that knew no bounds. This chamber is once united in the battle against addiction, and I was proud of the legislative work we.
Obviously, when I say I'm not a politics guy, I know that I realize I'm commenting on politics. So I just mean I'm not sure how like the House and the Senate specifically like.
We don't know all the procedures.
I don't know their debate protocol, right?
Yeah.
Did to address this crisis.
I generally would not sit through things like this. I'm only sitting through something like this specifically because it's related to the drug war.
Recently through the Support Act. Unfortunately, all the progress we made seemed to evaporate with the onset of the pandemic and the resulting lockdowns, mandates, social isolation, and fear of an invisible enemy. Recently, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced that 105...
No, the invisible enemy is the drug concept that you invented, that your side invented, and that people have invented.
I think he was talking about COVID.
Oh, I get you.
5,752 Americans died from drug overdoses from October 2020 to October 2021. Let me repeat that.
Drug overdoses. We're talking about marijuana, so let's bring up all the drug overdoses, even though no marijuana overdoses have happened.
752 Americans died from drug overdoses in 1 year's time. Many of these deaths can be directly attributed to fentanyl, which is now the leading cause of death in Americans aged 18 to 45. Down our southern border, Customs and Border Protection are confiscating record amounts of fentanyl coming across the Mexican border. The CBP seized over 11,201 pounds of fentanyl from October 2020.
Why are we hearing about fentanyl?
Which is a 40.
And how much pounds of fentanyl? What the fuck does that have to do with this bill?
Percent increase from the year before. That is enough fentanyl to kill 2.5 billion people, or the entire.
Okay. What is this amount of fentanyl? Enough fentanyl to kill 2.5 billion people. Okay. And then What does any of that have to do with marijuana?
Entire U.S. population
Because
7
marijuana
times.
is the gateway drug.
Then the marijuana, they're blaming marijuana for this production of fentanyl. And by the way, fentanyl is a federally legal drug that has been used to save lives. There is literally meaning that there is set amounts of fentanyl that do not kill people. And so to say that like X amount of fentanyl equals this much deaths, no. X amount of that much fentanyl, when used responsibly, equals health treatment.
Unless what they're actually telling us is that the secret ingredient in fentanyl is marijuana.
The way he's talking about the fentanyl only leading to death, even though it's a federally recognized substance that has been used to treat people medically, I just can't. Yeah, it sounds like he's fucking saying that the secret ingredient is death.
Yep.
It's over. To address this crisis, I introduced the HALT Fentanyl Act with my friend, the gentleman from the 9th District of Virginia. This legislation would permanently schedule fentanyl-related substances as a Schedule 1 and enable researchers to continue to study Schedule 1 substances for possible medical benefits. We must do everything we can to save lives, and I implore my colleagues to support this legislation. Mr. Speaker, if we adopt the motion to recommit, we will instruct the Committee on the Judiciary to consider my amendment to H.R. 3617 to permanently place fentanyl-related substances. May I have about 15 more seconds?
Yield another 30 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized for another 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. To permanently place fentanyl-related substances in the Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, and I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of the amendment in the record immediately prior to the vote on the motion to recommit. Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I yield back my time. Thank you very much.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished
Like I just spent so much time talking about fentanyl.
Ms. Velasquez.
Gentlelady from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this legislation because it is long overdue for our federal laws to catch up with the legal reality in almost every state in the Union, and because federal reform must place restorative justice as the top priority. I thank Speaker Pelosi, Chairman Nadler, and my fellow chairs for once again bringing this legislation to the House floor. Voters in states like New York have led the way in changing their cannabis law, emphasizing restorative justice for our most marginalized communities. This bill takes a meaningful approach to undo the wrongs of the failed war on drugs by removing cannabis as a Schedule I drug and encouraging states to expunge low-level possession records. Importantly, the MORE Act also helps entrepreneurs access affordable capital to start a legitimate business, which too often is a barrier to entrepreneurship for people of color, regardless of industry. As chair of the Small Business Committee, I am proud the MORE Act includes measures my colleague and I champion to ensure SBA programs like the flagship 7A loan program, the disaster loan program, and Small Business Development Center resources are available to legitimate cannabis businesses. The MORE Act is the best proposal to ensure communities disproportionately impacted by the prohibition of cannabis are best positioned to profit from its legalization. For that reason, I urge my colleagues to vote yes.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, record crime, record inflation, record gas prices, record number of illegal immigrants crossing our southern border. And what are Democrats doing today? Legalizing drugs.
Same old shit.
Legalizing
Same literal fucking argument every time. They have nothing else to really contribute. It's always going to be this.
Drugs and using American tax dollars to kickstart and prop up the marijuana industry. Wow, such a deal for the American people. Record crime. Every major urban area has increased crime, and Democrats are legalizing drugs and propping up the marijuana industry. 40-year high inflation. Hasn't been this high since 1982. We have some members not even born in, record inflation, and Democrats are focusing on legalizing drugs and kickstarting the marijuana industry. Record gas prices, $6 gas in California, $4 gas everywhere else, and Democrats are legalizing drugs and helping the marijuana industry, and, of course, 2
Marijuana.
million
Keeps using marijuana.
illegal immigrants crossed our southern border in the last 14
I mean, the whole thing literally says legalizing marijuana.
months, and Democrats are legalizing drugs and helping the cannabis industry. Oh, and by the way, and we have a Justice Department, we could be focused on this issue, we have a Justice Department that is treating parents as domestic terrorists, spying on moms and dads who simply show up at school board meetings. We know that's going on, putting a threat tag label on parents. This designation, this label on moms and dads, simply standing up for their kids.
Sounds like
and Democrats are focused on legalizing drugs and helping the cannabis industry. The majority leader, Democrat majority leader, said, why are we dealing with this today? You know why they're dealing with this today? Because they can't deal with the real problems facing American people. Left won't let them. You think the left's going to let them do what needs to be done to bring down gas prices? We sat in a hearing a few months ago. One of our Democrat colleagues, in that hearing, we had the CEOs of the oil and gas companies. He went down the line and said, will you pledge today to decrease production? They want less oil and gas. I asked after he got done. Literally, he went down the list. I said, what do you want, $8 gas? And the truth is they do. So they can't, the left will not let the Democrats do what needs to be done to help the inflation problem, the energy problem, the illegal immigration problem on our southern border. So what do? They legalize drugs. Wow. Wow. This is wrong, and everybody knows it. Let's focus on the things that matter for, as the majority leader said, for middle-class families who are having to drive to...
Middle-class families use drugs all the time.
Right? It's not like the middle class doesn't like drugs.
In fact, the middle class can afford to use drugs more so than people in poverty.
Yeah.
Because drugs are expensive.
In fact, legalization of drugs would bring down the price of drugs because now it's legal and we're not trying to get it from the back alleys and the illegal fucking sources.
Right.
To work, pick their kids up at school, take their kids to Little League practice, spending $4 and $5 a gallon to get them there and back. Let's focus on the things that matter. I urge a no vote and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Oregon reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this bill will greatly reduce crime by redefining as not crimes things that are now considered crimes, and by releasing people in jail who should not be in jail. It will produce justice, and it will reduce the expenses to the public. Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from California, who's been such a great champion in the fight for this legislation, Ms. Lee.
Gentlelady from California, Ms. Lee, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of H.R. 3617, the MORE Act. And I want to thank Speaker Pelosi, Leader Hoyer, Chairman Neal, and Chairman Nadler. Let me just thank you for your persistence, your perseverance, and really hanging in there and bringing this to the floor, because you know what the issues are and you know how important this is to repair the damage of the lives of so many people. So thank you, Chairman Nadler, so much. I want to also thank Congressman Blumenauer, my partner on so many issues, and of course our speaker, and Mr. Perlmutter, who's in the chair today, and everyone who has helped to bring this to the floor. And my condolences today with the family of our colleague, the late Representative Don Young, a champion on this issue. I honor his memory today as a founding member and co-chair of the Cannabis Caucus who voted for the MORE Act the first time it came to the floor. Also, let me thank our advocates for educating the public on this issue, which of course meant our members of Congress learn more about the importance of this, that this is also a racial justice bill. It's the product of a long time, the work of so many for a long time. And of course, I want to salute our staff. Amy, Julie, Samira, Gregory, Kayla, so many staff. As a former staff, right, look, I know how this was done, and I just want to thank our staff for really doing the heavy lifting on this. The MORE Act, yes, it includes my legislation, the Marijuana Justice Act, and the REFER Act, which is the first marijuana racial justice bill introduced in Congress many years ago. This bill would end federal prohibition and decriminalize cannabis by removing it from the list of Controlled Substances Act. That's what the MORE Act does. Make no mistake, yes, it is a racial justice bill. According to the ACLU, Black Americans are nearly 4 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis-related crimes than white Americans, despite equal rates of use. These arrests can have a detrimental impact on a person's quality of life and can lead to difficulty finding employment, securing housing, and assessing other benefits. I yield
the gentlelady 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry also. It brings tax revenue of billions to our states. Now, over 950 people are arrested daily for marijuana-related offenses. This is truly unjust. So we must end this failed policy of marijuana prohibition, which has led to the shattering of so many lives, primarily Black and brown people. And yes, that is extremely important. It's time to repair the damage. It's time to provide equal justice for those who have been unduly incarcerated. Public opinion support this. In fact, over 50 years ago, the National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse, or the Schaefer Commission, formally recommended to Congress that this be done. We're doing it today. Thank you again.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman.
Yeah, we talked about that on the stream as well, that the Schaefer Commission did, in fact, run a study and recommended decriminalization to the Nixon administration, but he ignored it.
Yep.
From Oregon is recognized.
Reserves.
Oh, gentleman from Oregon reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to another great champion of this legislation, 2 minutes and 30 seconds, I'm sorry, another great champion of this legislation, Mr. Blumenauer of Oregon.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Courtesy and his leadership and all the people that my friend Barbara Lee just acknowledged. You know, a century ago, we were in the midst of a prohibition against alcohol. And the problems that my dear friend from Oregon highlighted in terms of the prohibition against cannabis. I agree with him about the horrific situation in Southern Oregon. I look forward to working with him to try and remediate it. But the solution is to be found in this legislation. The problem of the cartels, the illegal activity, the black market is a result of the fact that the federal government does not have its act together. People across the country have acted to take it into their own hands. And as a result, we have a piecemeal approach. 48 states have some form of legalization. What Chairman Nadler and the committee has done is to provide a framework to be able to harness the forces, to be able to do the research so we can deal with impairment. The federal government interferes with that now. We have an opportunity to solve the horrific problem of lack of access to banking services, which makes dispensaries across the country sitting ducks. It adds to expenses for minorities. It adds to the problems of law enforcement. We face a situation now of great racial injustice in this country that the legislation faces. We have an opportunity to unlock untold benefits for more medical research and be able to channel the efforts into a legal market, to be able to have a taxing system federally and to be able to strengthen the legal cannabis market so that the profits flow to the people who should do it rather than the cartels and the corner drug dealers that still are cutting corners. My friend is right about the problems in Southern Oregon, but he is wrong about the solution. The MORE Act is a solution to provide the framework, provide the research, redirect the resources to be able to solve the problem that has been created by the failed prohibition on cannabis. This is historic legislation, in part because we will send this to the Senate, where there is a different mindset for the leadership. We've opened the opportunity to solve these problems. I urge us to take advantage of it and move forward. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman.
That was great. Also, it's just really interesting. Like we said earlier, like the Oregon, I was like, oh yeah, it must be a Southern Oregon thing. And sure enough, the other Oregon representative, who's from Portland, the more progressive side, comes up and hits all the talking points that I was talking about as far as the issues with his narrative and the cartel activity.
And from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my friend and former law school classmate, Representative Blumenauer. I just want to say, actually he was a few years ahead of me. I just want to say, I want to draw attention to the bill, page 15, where it calls out the expenditures. And it says the amounts in the trust fund shall be available without further appropriation only as follows. And then it reads, reflects Section 305.2A, Part 00 of the Omnibus Crime Control Safe Streets Act of 1968, which I dug out and read through 3 times, looking unsuccessfully for an allocation of money to local law enforcement agencies, such as the ones in Southern Oregon. It's not there. That money is going for very limited, very narrow purposes. How much money? Well, if this 8% tax had been applied to the amount of marijuana sold last year in the United States, the total is $400 million. Not the total sold, the total tax. $400 million, half of which would go to this narrow piece of work, not saying it's unimportant, but it's narrow. 50% called out here, then 10%, 25%, none to police. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, you've taken this up. Do it right. Get it right. And you have a whole bunch of work that needs to be done to get this bill right, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlelady from New York, Ms. Maloney.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise in strong support of the MORE Act, and I applaud my colleagues, Chairman Nadler and Barbara Lee, for their leadership on this critical legislation. For years, public support for marijuana legalization has surged. 37 states have voted to legalize marijuana. It's past time that Congress answers the call for marijuana justice. This sweeping legislation would finally decriminalize cannabis at the federal level by removing it from the Controlled Substance Act. The law would apply this retroactively to prior and pending convictions that have disproportionately harmed communities of color. The MORE Act would also help those whose convictions are overturned through the Opportunity Trust Fund that would provide job training, reentry assistance, legal aid, and health care. If we are serious about criminal justice, we need to get rid of the antiquated cannabis laws. The MORE Act would do just that. I hope my colleagues will join me in voting on this long overdue bill, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say again, I went down to Southern Oregon and I asked the law enforcement folks what we needed to do to try to head off the cartels, which are generating this huge sum of money for themselves. What could we do? And the answer was law enforcement. Because if you don't have force, you can't control the cartels. To get law enforcement requires people, that requires money, and this bill doesn't allocate any to that purpose. So since we know this bill is going to drive up the cost of legal marijuana, thus driving more people into the black market, why isn't there more money for law enforcement? Why isn't there any money for law enforcement? With that, I reserve.
I would draw more people to the black market, though. It doesn't drive more people to the black market.
No.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
He's not explaining why that happened.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. And still I rise, Mr. Nadler. Thank you so much. I thank Ms. Lee, Mr. Perlmutter. And I rise because I see this as a bill that will benefit some of the least, the last, and the lost. People who have been denied access to housing, denied access to loans, denied access to the things that we need to succeed in the United States of America. I plan to support it. I ask that my colleagues support it because it's tough being a black man with a criminal record in the United States of America. This bill will help a lot of black men have opportunities that they've been denied. I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Oregon
reserves.
Continues to reserve. Gentleman from New York's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter.
Gentleman's recognized.
The COVID pandemic has produced a rise in drug abuse, violent crime, and other indicators of collective trauma. These are pressing issues that urgently need resources devoted to them. We must stop wasting precious resources on marijuana offenses. Law enforcement simply cannot afford to chase small-time pot offenders, while violent and random crime continues to be on the rise nationwide. The ACLU report states wasting billions annually enforcing cannabis laws. This is money, time, and effort better spent on investing on true community safety. Further, Americans overwhelmingly want marijuana reform. 91% report that they believe that it should be legalized. Congress is long overdue in marijuana reform and decriminalizing this substance. But we have a long journey ahead to achieve social justice and criminal justice reform. The war on marijuana is a costly relic of the past. Let's vote yes today so we can build a safer and more equitable tomorrow. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to assure everyone that the police in Oregon are not chasing those who are using marijuana. Oregon legalized marijuana. That what we're having trouble with are the consequences of that legalization. And that's what I'm trying to bring to the attention of folks today, that if we're going to legalize on a national scale, then for goodness sakes, don't make the mistakes we made in Oregon. Get it right. Put into the bill appropriate funding for law enforcement, at least. By the way, we should put in a lot of other things too, which I previously mentioned. But
No. The problem,
the war in Ukraine.
These are not. No. He didn't mention the war in Ukraine, but these are not symptoms of legalization. He's trying to label the symptoms of this cartel activity in Oregon, in Southern Oregon, to specifically to this to legalization and not to the war on drugs itself. He's ignoring the fact that the reason that these cartels are propped up, the reason that these substances that they're selling are worth so much money, is because of all the legislation that's been put forward to ensure that these things are illegal, and because of all of the funding that the DEA and the police have gotten in order to enforce these things. That is why we're at where we're at. Not because you legalized it. You took a small step towards progress.
one of the things that absolutely has to be there is funding for local police, because this bill is going to drive up the demand for marijuana and up the cartels across the United States. Their presence, it's bad, and local law enforcement can't take care of it. The assertion that the FBI and Homeland Security and DEA are going to do so is incorrect, I know, because I've asked. And we have nothing from the Attorney General helping us in that space. So what I'm saying is, you're going to do this, get it right. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind the people that it is not the police's job, apparently, to stop crimes. It's not. They don't have to step in for you.
What are you saying, though?
So the whole thing he's saying is that, like, oh, they can't just... We're having a hard time with all these bad guys, right? And we need more funding in the police to take them down.
Right.
But the police don't actually have to act on people. They have to arrest people when they see crimes in progress. They don't actually have to go out of their way to stop people. And normally they don't.
Right.
So they're already not doing it, even though we've been funding them.
Sure.
We've given them money. We've given them more money. We've given them more money.
Right. They've
And
been
we're
fighting this
still
war for
having
forever.
the crazy illegal market. Another whatever $1 million bills still isn't going to stop these people because the police aren't going after them.
Right. It's just creating this cops and robbers game that creates jobs and that we've kept perpetuating for years and years.
Right. Because not even all the cartel members that get arrested lose their jobs in the cartel. They just get paid from while being in prison and move around the prison population and find new dealers and what have you.
Speaker, Mr. Benz refers to the cartels. Of course there are cartels. Of course they're making money because they have a monopoly of supply of a substance that has a great demand. You pass this bill, and those cartels will no longer have a monopoly. And the law enforcement, their expenses will go down because they will not have to enforce the marijuana laws, and they will.
Which is exactly a perfect counterpoint that does not get brought up enough, of course, by the other side. They fail to say that how much money is currently spent on enforcing the marijuana laws. So if you're looking for more money for enforcement, by literally decriminalizing this stuff, you then free up a bunch of time and resources that you can allocate towards other things like stopping the cartels.
The marijuana prohibition laws, nor will they have to fight the cartels, which won't be there anymore because their monopoly of supply will have been eliminated. I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Watson-Coleman.
Gentlelady from New Jersey is recognized for a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to everyone that my colleague Barbara Lee acknowledged earlier. I rise today in support of the MORE Act and on behalf of the countless families that have been disrupted and destroyed by our nation's failed drug policies and the devastating war on drugs. As a result of the war on drugs, the United States has a higher rate of incarceration than such human rights abusing governments as Russia, Belarus, and Iran. It also wastes more money than any other country locking up its citizens for personal drug use. Racial justice and cannabis decriminalization are inextricably intertwined, and the former cannot be achieved without the latter. By decriminalizing cannabis, we can reverse the trend of over-incarceration and get one step closer to dismantling the system that racism is so pervasive in our criminal justice system. The MORE Act is an important step in rewriting our future, and I urge my colleagues to support it. I yield back. Thank you.
The lady yields back. The chair will advise the managers. Mr. Nadler has 2 3/4 minutes. Mr. Bentz has 6 3/4 minutes left in their time. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to mention in response to the assertion that once this bill passes, if it does, that suddenly the cartels will disappear, sadly is not going to be true. And that is because legal marijuana will be 30% more expensive than that which is raised on the black market. That's why one has to be aware when one puts this kind of additional cost into this bill, 8%. On a gross basis, like keep wanting to assure people, they need to understand the difference between net profit and gross. What's going to happen is the cartels will have a 30% benefit advantage over privately raised marijuana. And so what I'm
Why would they have a 30% advantage? If it's legalized, then the prices would still drop. The cartel isn't really like, they're not even, the marijuana, okay.
No, if you want to talk about an illegal market, right? No, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Let me just finish this real quick. Let me just finish this thought. So the cartel doesn't sell marijuana in the USA. The marijuana that they sell it in other countries that have far stricter laws for cannabis, and therefore they get a much better price. They may be growing it here because they're taking advantage of, like I said, the fact that they can set up a weed smelling farm and not completely draw suspicion because it's in a decriminalized legal state. However, they're not selling it directly to the people in the state. The state people are still buying the recreational marijuana. In fact, if you look at least in Washington state, the state that we're in, if you look at literally the trajectory of the tax generated, it's grown every year. So more and more people are using legal recreational marijuana. So they're not using the black market up here in Washington. And the people in Oregon, again, like I said, they had so much of an oversupply. I don't know why this guy is literally lying, because I know for a fact, as someone who worked in this industry, that there was literally, in fact, I'm sure I could even find articles. There were literally articles claiming that Oregon had like $40 ounces out the door. By the way, Washington State now, I have sold up out of the door like $30 ounces in dispensaries that I've worked in. So to say that the black market has somehow got this big one up on the legal market, when Oregon literally has claimed that they had an oversupply issue, it even created debate that we may need to start creating laws that allow trafficking between state lines, because right now you can only sell within your own state. So if you're taking it from like Washington to Oregon, crossing state lines, you can't sell a Washington brand in Oregon, because crossing state lines would still be a federal offense because of the federal illegalities of this thing. So they literally had such an oversupply issue that talks about what that even looked like would be a problem. So Oregon has never had a problem with price, and this is just all smoke and mirrors. Like I said, the weed that the cartel is selling, which the cartel almost produces, they produce so little weed. If there is illegal grows happening and they're calling it cartel, that's bullshit. The cartel has much more lucrative opportunities. Weed doesn't make you that much anywhere compared to like cocaine and meth and these kinds of things. And now the fentanyl, if you want to say it, that if that is true that they're pushing that hard.
You know what we need? You know what these things need? They need like fact checkers, like the debates. The debate needs a fact checker.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's what we're here for.
I'm trying to say,
we just have to be
we have to be the jesters, the court fools, the fact checker.
Bill Wright. This isn't my thinking. This is
This
people
is your
who look
thinking.
into this extremely carefully, those who are trying to do this legally. And I'm saying this bill is incorrectly crafted on that level and many others. I reserve.
Reserves, gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky.
Ms. Schakowsky is recognized for 1 minute.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, but I also want to recognize Representative Blumenauer for his decades of work on this issue. The MORE Act is the most comprehensive marijuana reform bill in Congress, and it is rooted in social justice.
I liked her
The
diss
criminalization of
decades
marijuana and this nation's failed war on drugs has devastated our communities of color. It has led to over-policing, mass incarceration, and the destruction of families. This critical legislation takes steps to undo these harms. Today, I urge my colleagues to vote for criminal justice reform, to vote for an equitable marijuana industry, and to vote for beginning to repair the harms caused by decades
of racist marijuana criminalization and enforcement. And so I urge all my colleagues today to vote yes on the MORE Act, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the congressional record a list of multiple items, which I will now review. First,
without objection.
Policy statement from the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry on marijuana legalization. Second, facts for families from the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry on marijuana.
Child and adolescent psychiatry shouldn't exist because psychiatry is purely based on the format of giving children drugs for their conditions. And so you go to see a psychiatrist to get pills, which are drugs. And so this guy's literally saying that the guy who gives you your kids pills and makes them dependent on them for functioning is against them taking a different drug, but he's totally okay giving them other kinds of drugs because they're morally okay drugs according to him, right? So that's the person who we're listening to right now.
Marijuana and teens. Third, the Insurance Information Institute report on marijuana and impaired driving. Next, the article from verywellhealth.com titled "Is Marijuana Addictive?" by Ashley Olivine, PhD. Next, NBC News article titled "Legalized Marijuana Linked to Sharp Rise in Car Crashes." Next, the Denver Post article titled "Are You High? The Science of Testing for Marijuana Impairment is..."
This guy's face, did you see that guy's face? Are you high? That guy's like, yeah, I'm fucking high. I thought I took it as him being like, yeah, I'm fucking high.
Article titled "The U.S. Grapples with How to Gauge Just How High Cannabis Users Are." I reserve.
Without objection. Those are placed in the record. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
What were you saying?
I have the neck of a young Mitch McConnell.
Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlelady from Nevada, Ms. Titus.
Nevada has legal weed, of course.
For one
legal
Thank
recreational.
you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. The MORE Act is a historic piece of legislation, no question about it. It removes criminal convictions for marijuana use that have stigmatized the lives of thousands of individuals in our country, particularly those of color. In addition, tragically, our veterans have been denied access to medical marijuana for treatment of pain management and also post-traumatic stress syndrome after they have offered their lives and put their lives in danger for us. Supported by public vote, Nevada legalized medical marijuana in
I don't know. It's a bit of a stretch to say that weed treats PTSD, but weed definitely relaxes you, and in a relaxed state, it's probably you're not being triggered.
Helped some people.
Yeah, I'm sure.
PTSD.
Like I said, yeah, just by being relaxed, but it's not like a treatment. I feel like it's just something that relaxes you, and when you're relaxed, that provides a better mental health environment for your brain, and so you're less likely to be triggered by your PTSD.
Right, it's an aid at best.
Right, it's not an actual treatment. I would definitely, it is a treatment. A pain management, I could definitely see that. I have seen people who manage their pain with cannabis and do so successfully. I know that I have had moments in which, now not for, I wouldn't say like chronic pains, but for definitely like different, just basic ache and pains or like, day-to-day endurance, I would say it definitely has had positive benefits for myself. I know that Mr. Gundam, when he started using it, told me how much better his joints and things felt. So I'd say that as a pain manager, at least as a mild one, that it does have efficacy there.
2001 decriminalized marijuana use in 2017 and has shown that regulating marijuana works. Most of the other states have done the same, so it's time for the nation to follow suit. With the passage of the MORE Act, the marijuana industry can become a key element of growing and diversifying our economy, creating more good jobs and putting more folks back to work as we recover from the pandemic. I urge a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
Lady yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Reserves. I reserve.
Reserves. Gentleman from New York, I'd Chair will advise the managers. Gentleman from New York has 45 seconds. Gentleman from Oregon, 5 3/4.
Wait, real quick, chat.
15 seconds for the purpose of a unanimous consent request to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Yield back the time, I'm sure. Let me submit Health Affairs,
He's
Culture
gone.
of Health, shows
This is the greatest night in
importance
television.
of cannabis liberalization policy, and all of these individuals, religious groups, Center for American Progress, ask unanimous consent to submit these letters and statements into the record.
Without objection.
All right,
Gentleman
let's
from
see.
New York reserves.
I'll get a
Gentleman
little
from
more.
Oregon is recognized.
Reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from New York is prepared to close. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Prepared to close,
my goodness.
Mr. Speaker.
Prepared to
Gentleman is
close.
recognized for as much time as he may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So
Sit down, sir.
this bill, as I mentioned previously, fails to appropriately fund the police in all the states that will be facing the challenges we face in Oregon. This is not a question of money. The bill, as drawn, will be raising literally
Have they
billions
said
of
anything
dollars
stupid?
at an 8% tax.
Yes.
Over
damn.
the next how many years? Billions. And so somehow some of that money has to make its way into law enforcement. Without law enforcement, you'll see situations like we have in Southern Oregon replicate across the nation, regardless of the optimistic thought that somehow the cartels no longer have the marijuana, therefore, or excuse me, the monopoly, therefore they will go away. That's not going to be the case as long as
Nobody said they're going to go away. They just said they would stop selling marijuana.
there's a higher price, and in many cases it's going to be a much higher price for legally produced marijuana. The bill fails to address impairment. My friends, many of them in the law enforcement space, including my brother, a former county sheriff, have said this is a huge problem where we don't know when people are driving impaired.
Of course, the law enforcement wants that. They want to be able to pull more people over and find more people. Of course, it's a huge problem for them.
Studies are ongoing. Why are we broadening this problem when we don't know how to charge those who are driving under the influence? It, of course, as we heard, fails to address the ever-increasing potency of the drug. It fails to address the age at which marijuana can be legally used. What is that about?
People drive under the influence of coffee. What are the consequences of that? Have we done studies on that?
We know this drug adversely affects particularly young men's brains development all the way up to age 26. And yet this bill
I beat your time limit.
says nothing about it. And it fails to address the differences between marijuana and hemp. And some would say, well, that's such a small issue. It's a huge issue.
No,
it's a huge
it's
issue.
Not. It's a non-issue. It's not a huge issue or a small issue. It's a non-issue.
To be addressed. This bill is the proper vehicle to address these issues. And I see that there are some amendments being
Marijuana and hemp are both cannabis.
brought, which perhaps will
Cannabinoids are both the same classification of molecules.
at least go partially in that direction. But the bill itself and the legalization is premature given the nature of those amendments. So this is an untimely, incomplete bill. Its greatest failure is in not recognizing and addressing the damage the drug will do to our kids and our communities. I strongly urge a no vote.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, last Congress, the House voted on a bipartisan basis to address this issue. Unfortunately, the Senate failed to act, so I'm pleased that we are moving forward again today. Over the past 2 decades, public support for legalizing marijuana has surged. States have led the way and continue to lead the way on marijuana reform, but our federal laws have not kept pace with the obvious need for change. It's time for the federal government to catch up to do what is right. The MORE Act would treat marijuana as a public health issue rather than a criminal matter, and would begin to rectify the heavy toll that criminalization has taken, particularly on communities of color and low-income communities. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. All time for debate has expired. Each further amendment printed in Part B of House Report 117-285 shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent
we don't need to hear them argue about the amendments. But yeah, so that was the debate that led to the eventual passing, and those were the counterpoints. I think that we offered a pretty fair analysis of both sides of it, and we did point out, the sides of the Democrats that I disagreed with, and of course the drug war rhetoric that the Biden administration still, holds strong, and the pro-police standpoint. But I definitely feel like there was just so much smoke and mirrors going on the other side, with the constant, like basically almost every single person had the same talking point, just saying there's other crazy things going on. Why are we working about this? Why are we worrying about this? And when that is your like strongest argument, the fact that like this isn't really that big of a deal, well, you're right. It isn't that big of a deal. And so therefore we should just address it and finally move on, because it's been such a long fucking ordeal. A long fucking war. You have anything else to add, Mr. Gundam?
I mean, just legalize it. There's no need for all this back and forth and how the legal drug market is doing its thing. Just knock it off already. That's it.
Well, thank you guys for tuning into Hyrule Heroes. I honestly did not know how long that debate was going to go on for, and we did spend a little bit of time going into the article too with the bong. We went not too far over our time, but usually we do stream till about 3 hours. But hope that you guys enjoyed the format. Hope that you guys enjoy the YouTube video that comes from this, and that we start seeing some new followers and people who want to come talk to us about drug policy. Thanks for everybody that did come out. Thanks for all of our help tonight from our team. And we will see you guys next week for another round of Hyrule Heroes.
Yep.
Follow us on all the stuff. Like and subscribe. Do all the things. You guys have a good weekend. Peace.